I'd like to call the special meeting of, what is today? January 27th, 2014. And, well, we don't have Pledge Allegiance, but we're going to do one anyway. Would you please join me in the Pledge Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco.
Here.
Hart.
Here.
Hotchkiss. Here. Murillo.
Here.
Rouse. Here. White. Here. Mayor Schneider.
Here. So is there any public comment item not on today's agenda?
Not that I know of.
Okay. So just so everyone knows what's going to happen this evening, first of all, thank you all for being here. And we moved to the council chambers because we knew it would be a lively event. And there's interpretation services, headsets available if necessary in here as well. We're going to have a staff presentation. And after the full presentation, then council can ask questions. So if you could hold your questions until we get through the full presentation. And then have public comment. And then, Randy, you have something you need to say because that brings up the next point.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Madam Mayor, if we get down to the point where we get to the downtown side street sidewalks off of State Street, I will need to step down from that item because I have a business that abuts one of those sidewalks.
Right. So the way that will work is the seven of us will talk about everything but the sidewalks, and then Mr. Rouse will leave the room, and then the six of us can talk about sidewalks, and then Mr. Rouse can come back, and we'll see where we are with the funding. And if we have to kick Mr. Rouse out again for some reason, we'll do so.
I have to come back?
You might. Yeah, you'll have to come back. So, okay. With that, Mr. Armstrong or Mr. Casey?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. We are here to talk about the use of one-time monies for capital projects. It's nice to be in this position where we have the opportunity to expend some monies on projects. We haven't been in that situation for a while. The workshop summary is that I'll go over briefly the source of the one-time funds, projects that have been funded with the former redevelopment agency excess bond proceeds, so they're already taken care of. The criteria staff used for bringing forward projects for your consideration tonight, a summary of the projects. I'll walk through them one by one and give you a brief overview and understanding of the projects, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions after I go through them all. And we also have staff here who are the support behind these projects and know them in greater detail if you have detailed questions. And then certainly take public comment, and then bring it back to the full council to have a dialogue about which projects you want to fund and which you don't. We'll have a spreadsheet up for you at the end that will be interactive, that as you move projects around or change the dollar amount, you can see where the total adds up and what projects you're able to fund or not. And we hope to leave this evening with direction from you about how to proceed with using these one-time monies on important capital projects. So the available monies, just to know what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a little bit over $4.3 million of funds that came from 4 different sources. One, as you were aware, the redevelopment agency has been dissolved. And as part of that, we had to turn over a lot of our cash on hand, both from our capital and from our housing fund, back to the taxing entities. However, the city is one of those taxing entities, and we got 13% back on every dollar that we gave to the county auditor to distribute. And so that total came up to about $2 million that came back to the city as general fund revenue through the dissolution of the redevelopment agency. And so we decided to use a capital process to go through the distribution of those funds. We had a multi-year issue with the county that all the cities in the state had with counties about what the appropriate administrative fee was for administering the property tax process, and a court ruling came down in our favor on that. And so we got reimbursed about $1.1 million from the county for that, and so we put that into this process. We were able, through our insurance, to get reimbursed for funds that were stolen from us in the parking violation issue in the police department. And so through our good auditing trail, we were able to go to the insurance company and get reimbursed for that. So that was about $600,000. And then we sold an excess sale of city property. I believe this was the parking lot next to the old post office on Lower Milpa Street. That provided us with some revenue, a little over $500,000. So in total, the source of monies come up to about $4.3 million. So briefly, these 4 projects have been funded and approved by the State Department of Finance to use the excess bond proceeds that we had through the redevelopment agency. And so this is good news. These are projects that can use that money, and the $4.3 million we can look at other projects for. They include the Bath Street Pocket Park, the corner of Bath and Ortega, a very small parcel, but a needed parcel in that neighborhood. And so I believe it's on your council agenda process tomorrow to finish that design and get it installed. Same tomorrow, the 911 dispatch center, moving it from the basement of the police building into the Granada Garage, which is a much better and safer place for it to go. That's fully funded through the bond proceeds. Finishing the west downtown street lighting, the final 2 phases, that will be coming forward as well. So that's a good improvement for the west downtown area. And then the Cabrillo Bathhouse and Pavilion, this $1 million or so is for the initial design work that will go into that. We believe that we still have about $8 million more of excess bond proceeds dedicated to the Cabrillo Bathhouse that will come in the future to help fund a good majority of the cost of that. Probably won't be the total amounts, probably closer to a $10 million project. But we think through private fundraising and such, we'd be able to finish off the Cabrillo Bathhouse, which will be a wonderful renovation of that building, similar to what we did at the Carrillo Recreation Center just a couple years ago. So that's good news that these 4 projects are taken care of that way. I just wanted to briefly mention that there's another capital process going on as you have this conversation. It's the Community Development Block Grant cycle that working through city staff and also the Neighborhood Advisory Council, the city submits some capital projects for funding. These 5 projects have been submitted. They're actually going in front of the committee in the next couple weeks or so for their recommendation. It's the West Side Center restroom remodel, the design for the Montecito Yananali Bridge sidewalk. I will mention that that is one of higher priority items that we're going to talk about tonight. So if it gets funded tonight, that project would drop off from this list going in front of the Human Services CDBG committee. And then the other 4 projects will still go through. There's not enough capital money to fund these 5 projects. And in addition, there's 2 additional community capital projects from nonprofits that have been submitted. So this is a competitive process. And so if the sidewalk is funded tonight, that dropping off will make available monies for the other projects as well. Bus shelters, Voluntario street access ramps, and the Parque de los Niños playground equipment is being submitted for funding through that process. So the criteria staff used for tonight's discussion is that first we looked at former redevelopment agency capital projects that were left unfunded. You had gone through a lot of process of looking at RDA capital to finish out through the remaining years of the redevelopment agency. A good chunk of the money through this process is former RDA money that came back to the city, and so we thought there was a nexus there that you should at least look at some of those former RDA projects and decide if they're still priorities that we would want to finish. We also looked at the existing 6-year capital improvement plan, kind of as our guiding document for capital improvements, and looked at the next list of high priority capital projects from there. We looked at projects that the council over the last year, knowing that we were going to have this process, that you kind of forwarded to this deliberation, and so we brought some of those forward. We brought forward just a couple of staff projects that we thought were high priorities as we're kind of coming out of the recession, where are some areas of great need for the city, and so I'll highlight those. And then we also looked at project readiness. The feeling is we've got this cash on hand, let's get it out the door, make improvements, get people working, and get improvements out for our community. So 2 pages, a summary of the projects. I'm going to go through them one by one, though, just to explain them so we all know what we're talking about. I will say that in the staff report, and as we go through this process, they're in priority order of what staff feels they might be. We put this forward as a suggestion for you. The whole purpose of tonight is for you to make amendments, change, shift, look at the dollar amounts, move projects around. But we thought it would help facilitate the discussion to have us kind of put forward a recommendation to you. And a lot of that recommendation is based upon where we've heard feedback from you over time on these projects and where we think they might be of importance as well. So this is just a summary list of the projects. There's 9 on this first page. Again, I'll go through them in order. If you go down to number 12, the Cabrillo Ball Field renovation project, items 1 through 12 would be funded with the $4.3 million available. And again, at the end, I'll have a spreadsheet that will kind of highlight that in better detail. But from a sense of how much money is available, that gives you a sense that we could fund projects 1 through 12. And then, unfortunately, the others would not be funded at this point, and we'd have to evaluate whether they're priorities going forward, future capital improvement project cycles, and the like. So let's start off. I'm using the attachments that were in your council agenda report. I don't expect people to be able to read the text up on the screen, but it kind of just gives a quick summary of the project and a visual, and so I'll just walk through those for you. The first project on our list is upgrading the digital microwave radio links that link the different fire facilities in the city. It's really the only way that they're able, from our financial management system and other areas, to link up our computer network, and that's using the digital microwave radio links. It's not a big dollar amount in the scheme of what we're talking about tonight, but it is important. I believe we've already ordered the equipment. This really needs to happen to maintain the communication connection between fire stations 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. Second project is the Laguna Flood Control Facility repairs. This is the area on the ocean side of Cabrillo Boulevard at Laguna Channel. And it's a really important facility for flood control purposes that really impacts the Gutierrez and Haley corridor during very heavy rains and high tides. The total project to replace this facility would be $2.5 million. We're looking at a request of $500,000 to do some basic improvements like the Laguna Inlet Channel wall slopes, some tide gate repairs, the inlet grate access catwalk for cleaning debris off during heavy storms, and other structural repairs to the facility. So it doesn't complete the repair of this facility, but it certainly improves it. And the Public Works Department said, you know what, this really is our top priority. This is just kind of a basic infrastructure we need to be able to maintain because we don't want it to fail. Next high priority project is the East Side street lighting improvements. The next 3 projects came out of the East Side study that staff did with the community that came before the City Council, I believe about 6 months or so ago, and you referred a number of those projects to this process to try to fund. This recommendation is for $280,000 of street lighting improvements. It would address about 250 streetlights on the east side, and it would retrofit them to light-emitting diodes, or LED lighting, which is much brighter lighting. If you can see up on the top left corner, you have the existing lighting, and then on the right is what the LED lighting would look like. Isla Vista has a number of streets that have already been retrofitted, and a group of citizens and staff went out and looked at it and could identify. We're also recommending that 14 new lights be added to Edison poles in mid-block areas, to existing power poles along Indio Muerto, Haley, Salinas, and Coda streets. And so that would be some additional lighting as well. And staff's recommendation is that you do these improvements knowing that lighting is of critical importance. Do these improvements, see how the improved lighting works, and then continue to look at additional lighting needs on the east side and other neighborhoods and kind of fill in gaps that might be occurring there as well. The Montecito-Yananali Bridge sidewalk is another high priority that came out of the East Side study. This is a total funding request for $433,000. This would fund the design and installation of the sidewalk. On the bridge, it's just below the 5 Points roundabout at Salinas. It would be a cantilever pedestrian bridge and just a slight narrowing of the auto lanes as you go over that pinch point. It's a real pinch point in the neighborhood for community access to and from different schools and neighborhoods, and so we're recommending that. This is the project I mentioned. We had submitted a community development block grant design request for $75,000. If you fund this for the full amount, we'd be able to move forward with the full project.
Mr. Casey, I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. I know more people came in, and Jessica, I don't know if you were, someone was handing out Spanish interpretation headsets if people need them, and they're up here at the table. So, and I'd say that in Spanish if I could. But I just want to make sure, maybe talk to Eva or someone if other people need, just want to make sure everyone's understanding what's going on. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry.
No problem. Next project is the Eastside Neighborhood Pedestrian Refuge Islands. And so this would be to install 6 refuge islands in the Eastside neighborhood. 5 of them would be located along Aliso Street, and then 1 would be located at the intersection of Jennings and Nopal Street. Again, this came out of the Eastside Neighborhood Transportation Management Planning process and is a way to provide some safety for crossing intersections in the neighborhood. Next up is a matching grant for the Children's Library remodel. This has been a high priority for the community and for council to renovate the downstairs portion of the library to move the Children's Library down there. We're requesting the council consider a $500,000 grant towards that project. There is active fundraising going on. They've fundraised over $2 million to date for the project. Construction is about $3.6 million, but their goal is about $5 million, which would include an endowment and installation and other materials. And so this would be a gesture on the city's part towards that active community fundraising to get the children's library remodel completed. Next is a project that council referred to this process, and that would be a contribution to the Las Positas Road Cliff Drive roundabout. You had a big meeting on this a couple months ago and decided that the roundabout was the preferred alternative, but there's a funding shortfall of about $700,000 to fully fund the project. And so we bring that forward to you for your consideration. There is grant money that's already assigned to this project, but it's not sufficient to complete the roundabout design. So $700,000 from this process would do that. Staff brings forward the potential for rebuilding the Gateway and Median Island Parkway landscapes. We're identifying landscapes and median islands that are kind of in the gateway locations in the city. They were installed and designed 20, 30 plus years ago. They need to be rebuilt. This is one on Garden Street that we show here as a picture. It's overgrown. It's difficult to maintain. It's not drought-tolerant landscaping. And so we think it's a good idea at this point to rebuild and replant and revegetate and redesign these medians, A, so that they look better, and B, that they're easier to maintain going forward and also are drought tolerant. So we recommend that on a number of median islands throughout town. Additional citywide street pavement repair. This is nothing fancy about this. It is our annual street maintenance that we do, that we put money from different variety of sources to keep on top of repairing citywide streets across the city. We are slowly kind of falling behind the appropriate maintenance schedule we should have on streets. You've had presentations on that. This wouldn't be enough to fix that shortfall of funding, but it would be a shot in the arm. It'd be about additional 90,000 square feet of asphalt overlay that we could put into the next overlay process. And so we're recommending that you consider that. Citywide signage design. This is another one that staff has brought forward. There's been a lot of conversation with former council member Grant House, with the Chamber of Commerce, with Visit Santa Barbara, with the downtown organization, to take a look at our visitor signage that we have throughout town. If you look at it next time you go walking or driving, there are different eras of signs. They are placed somewhat haphazardly, and there's no kind of coordination and comprehensiveness to it. And we think that a city of Santa Barbara that does have quite a large tourist population, and even for local residents, having a coordinated signage program that is well thought out, well designed, and well implemented would be good. So we're recommending $250,000 towards design. I will say they're not cheap to do. And the installation, we think, is probably at least another $600,000. It could be more. But we think it's something that the city should maybe take the lead and then working with the visitor organizations, do a comprehensive design, know where the signs are, come up with a design palette, identify what you would want to directionally lead people to, and the such. If you look at a number of communities like us, Santa Monica, Pasadena, Monterey, they have very good coordinated signage programs in their downtown, which really help the visitors. Library Plaza final design. We are going through the review process right now on the Library Plaza design. Conceptual design will be at Historic Landmarks Commission in February. We were just at the Parks and Recreation Commission, had a very favorable review. We've spent the last 6 months finalizing that conceptual design and working with the Art Museum to have a coordinated design that works for both entities. This would continue that process and get us to final design such that then we'd be at a spot to look for the cost to actually implement the plaza update. That could be done in a number of ways. That could fall upon the city. It could be a partnership with the museum. The museum is looking at the possibility of doing some geothermal wells underneath the plaza to help the heating and cooling with the Art Museum. If so, we would have a design of what we'd want the plaza to look like to go right back on top. And so kind of being ready for any number of opportunities is the reason we bring forward this request to get the final design done on Library Plaza. And Cabrillo Ball Field renovation. This has been talked about for a number of years with the Parks and Recreation Commission and with the community. This is down on Cabrillo Boulevard and Milpas Street. This would install a home run fence to define the field better, revitalize park landscaping, new trees, irrigation system renovation, install park safety lighting, and also find some spots for additional recreational opportunities in some of the underutilized corners of the area. So this would fully fund that effort going forward. And then these next projects, just in the staff's list of orders and dollar amounts, would be the ones that are not funded in the current proposal that you have forward, and that's what we want you to talk about. But they're also equally important projects. It's really difficult. The police building, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system is over 50 years old and is in need of replacement. It's been put off for a number of years because when the redevelopment agency was active, we were moving towards maybe a brand new police facility, and so you don't want to put a lot of money into facilities and equipment if you're looking at tearing the building down and building back new. Now that that money's gone away, we don't know where we're going to come up with the $60 million in the near term to fund a new police building. And so we need to take care of some of the basic infrastructure for the police facility. It's about $2 million total in cost. Our facilities budget is picking up a good portion of the money. If we added $600,000 through this process, it would help finish that project and not put a further strain on the facilities budget as it has other priorities to kind of meet throughout the community. If we don't fund it tonight, we'll probably find the money in the facilities budget and therefore have to defer other projects within the system. And Mr. Dewey's here and can talk more about that if you have questions. The self-insurance fund, reimbursing it for the Eland Place judgment. If you recall, we abandoned Eland Place, and there was a court settlement for about $640,000 against the city, and we funded that out of the self-insurance fund. Staff is now recommending this one not necessarily be funded tonight. We had talked about that. One option of funding this is to go to the streets fund, but the streets fund is in need of, funding street repair projects and the such. The self-insurance fund does have a balance. Our recommendation tonight is maybe wait a year and see how the self-insurance fund does with other claims that may or may not come in over the next year, and it might be able to kind of absorb the cost of this on its own. And so we think that you can maybe hold off on this. If for whatever reason the self-insurance fund is short, then we'll come back to you in the next budget cycle and talk about a process of kind of replenishing that to meet this need. Lower Milpas pedestrian improvement design. This would be to try to get a sidewalk installed on the east side of Milpas, essentially from the railroad tracks by Tri-County Produce down to Cabrillo Boulevard. It's a tricky side of the street if you look at it from how you would get a sidewalk in. You've got parking in a way, you've got right-of-way issues, you've got front yards, and so it's not simple to do. The request for $100,000 would at least get a design done. But from staff's standpoint, it didn't rise to meet the needs of the projects that were ahead of it. Contribution to Kids World renovation. It's time for a new Kids World. It's run its useful life. It's over 22 years old. And so total project costs about $400,000. The general fund, this would be proposed as a matching fund with solicitation for grants and other community sources to kind of finish that project off. And then the Community Arts Workshop is the last one tonight. This one we kind of put last, not so much in a priority order, but this was a request from the Community Workshop to consider funding for this. If you recall, this is the old recycling plant at the corner of Coda and Ortega. We've been talking to the community arts folks to do a workshop at the site for a number of years now. It would serve as the Solstice Parade staging area, as well as other year-round activities that they could do. There was about $1 million set aside for redevelopment agency funds to go towards fixing this project up. That got lost through the dissolution process. But we kept moving forward with the arts community to do a long-term lease on this city property for $1 a year. And so a pretty major contribution of free land, although there is needs for the project to go forward. And so we're close to finishing that negotiation coming up. And the arts folks, as they kind of look at their needs, says, could the city still at least contribute $300,000 towards some of the key first implementation items, and then they would fundraise the rest. And I think the rest is still well over $1 million that they would need to go out and fundraise. So they submitted that letter request in December, and so we include that here for your consideration as well about how to fit in. I'll mention that I did go to the Neighborhood Advisory Council a week and a half ago to get their input. They supported staff's recommendations and priority orders and suggested and advised council that they would like to see a priority for the neighborhood projects, especially the street lighting. I think the street lighting had the most conversation, as well as the bridge cantilever at the Yananali-Montecito intersection. I think those two were clearly top priorities for the Neighborhood Advisory Council and the people who spoke at the meeting. And the Neighborhood Advisory Council continues to support the items submitted for the Community Development Block Grant funding. And they also wanted to make a point that if we go forward with the lighting proposal tonight, that's not the end of street lighting on the east side. They would like to make sure that we come back and evaluate how the lighting is working after it's installed and continue to look at that as a priority for the neighborhood and perhaps fund additional improvements as necessary once we see how those projects work out. So that's a real quick overview of all the projects. Again, we have staff here to answer any questions. We're happy to answer that and then help facilitate the dialogue as we go through trying to prioritize and look for money.
And again, because of Councilmember Rouse's conflict, the one other project that's on the list we'll talk about after you finish these deliberations, and then he's able to leave the room.
Great. So questions from the council. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Other than the library, the children's library sort of seed funding, is there anything that might be considered priming the pump here that would allow us to go to either state or federal sources for additional funds?
Madam Mayor, council members, we always look for grant opportunities for projects. I don't see any of these as necessarily priming the pump for other outside agencies. There were a couple that's going to be community fundraising. The Community Arts Workshop, the library, Kids World are examples of that. And I think there's even been conversation in the community about the Las Positas Cliff Drive roundabout, maybe some fundraising to help meet that need as well. So I look at kind of some more local fundraising as opposed to priming the pump for grant opportunities. I think these projects kind of came up to the top of the priority list because there aren't other sources of funds to be able to fund them, and that's why we think they're high priority and
Thank you.
to be funded.
White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the Las Positas roundabout, there was, in the previous council discussion, there was allusion to two safety projects, which one on Las Positas and one on Cliff. Is there any progress on that? The hope would be that there would be some money going toward the roundabout.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, the two safety projects that we're working on right now, one is a separated bike and pedestrian pathway adjacent to Las Positas Road going north from Cliff Drive, and the other is some sort of enhanced pedestrian bike facility on Cliff Drive, and we don't quite know what that would look like yet. We're still really early on in developing concepts for those two projects. If we are successful in getting funding, it's probably a grant application in 2015 and maybe again in 2016 for each of those projects. We don't foresee either of those projects contributing any funding to the roundabout project that would reduce the cost of the roundabout to the city.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Casey, got a couple of questions about items that seem to be stopgap type funding items, and one would be the Laguna flood control facility repairs. So the total is a $2.5 million project. Does this $500,000 just get us a few more years, or is it part of that $2.5 million? Are we actually making a work in progress, or is it just a stopgap that we come back and redo? I'll let you answer that.
Kelly.
Madam Mayor and Council, Browning is here too. He maintains the facilities. I've been working on it for 20 years. So, Browning, why don't you lead?
Thank you. Browning, I'm the transportation manager. It is a temporary stopgap measure, just do some temporary repairs to keep the facility operational. We know there's a need for a long-term permanent fix for the facility, but this is taking care of our immediate needs. We have some safety concerns that we want to take care of in terms of making it safer for our staff that's working down there, as well as we know there's some problems with the walls in the channel that need to be repaired because they're at risk of caving in at some point in time. They're currently being undermined by squirrels.
Squirrels.
Squirrels, yes.
Okay.
Once again, the squirrels raise their ugly head. And then my next question was about the police station. Same idea. $600,000 for the HVAC, which is we all know is sorely needed. Certainly not the project we had discussed and envisioned before. Mr. Dewey's here, so I was wondering what that gets us and how does that retrofit allow us to maintain occupancy of that building in the near future?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, I'm Jim Dewey, Facilities Manager. Altogether, this project, this is just focusing on the HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning equipment. And what I found is, looking at the facility, it was probably most cost-effective to replace all the equipment at once. And so I estimate the budget to be about $2 million. We had a gap of about $600,000 in order to complete the project. And I have looked at some other opportunities to defer projects in order to fund that next year. So there is sort of another funding mechanism, but it's just a matter of deferring more projects that we would normally do.
And Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, this is clearly just a habitability issue of having airflow in the system and having heat and having air conditioning. It doesn't get at the basic structural issues of the facility. It doesn't get to the long-term need to replace the building. It just is a practical reality of we're going to be there for a few more years, and we need to at least have the heating and ventilation and cooling systems in place and working while we're doing that.
Very good. And then the last question is with the Community Arts Workshop. The work that is being proposed for occupancy of that building, as landlords, is that the kind of work that would probably need to be done in any case, no matter what happens, whether or not we successfully execute a lease with these folks? I mean, in terms of the soil remediation, handicapped facilities, restrooms, no matter what we use that for, going forward, I'm assuming they're going to be occupying the building, but in the case of somehow they fade away or whatever, this is work that would have to be done in any case?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, it depends on what the use of the property would be. For an arts workshop, yes, the work that's going forward is really appropriate to kind of reuse the existing buildings. It allows for kind of set design and storage and that type of stuff that works really well with those facilities. I'm not sure what a future use would be if this did not become a community arts workshop or morphed into something else in the future. It could be something as simple as a surface parking lot. And then, you wouldn't need those old buildings once you fixed them up. So it's just hard to say. It depends on what you would envision as a reuse of the property if it wasn't an arts workshop. I think for an arts workshop, it's definitely critically needed and improvements that are well thought out.
Hey, just follow up on Mr. Rouse's piece about the headquarters, police department headquarters. Doing the HVAC system sooner, when it's done, we'll have, I imagine, some energy savings. I mean, maybe not to the tune of $600,000 in a year, but what would be the estimate? Do you have an estimate of what those savings would be? Because that would be taken out of the operating budget for the PD.
I don't have an estimate with me right now, but it is significant. It will eliminate a boiler, so it'll cut down the gas consumption of the building by over 90%, and it also reduce the electrical probably by 50%. So, I mean, it is a significant savings.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Casey, so I'm assuming that the top item is the one you're recommending the most because it has to do with fire safety. Can you argue a little bit more about how having this equipment or these links would work in a fire emergency?
And we can bring up Chief McElroy as well. It's not so much emergency, it's for day-to-day operations of keeping the communication lines open among the different stations. We're not hardwired to all the different stations, and so you use these microwave radio links to actually transmit data, connect to our city infrastructure from a computer standpoint.
So it's not just they pick up the phone and can talk. You're talking about computer technology.
What we have the data terminals that are in each of the stations, and going to those terminals is the information we get from our CAD system over at the police department. So a 911 call is initiated. That information is sent to the station in a number of ways. It's sent to the computer in the stations, it's also sent to the computer in the fire engine. We've had problems with those dropping off and at a number of stations. And in addition to our records management system, which we record all the data of everything we do every day, and that has to do with our reports, it has to do with the inspections that we do, it has to do with all the training we do. We had 38,000 hours of training last year, so all that's memorialized in that system. And what we found over the years was that certain stations would drop offline. The station on the Mesa, station on the west side, so Station 5, Station 6, Station 3 to some extent, and also Station 8 out at the airport. And it wasn't until this year that we identified the problem, which was the bandwidth to the stations. And so the solution that was we developed was coming up with these microwave links to the stations. So it'll give us really reliable sources of data, and it's really critical for us, especially when we're getting information going to calls and premise history at calls.
Okay. You had me at hello. Okay. And then the same question on the second item, the Laguna Flood Control Facility repairs. And then I also had a question about the funding, because Laguna Creek, and I continue my campaign to call it Laguna Creek instead of Laguna Channel. It really is a waterway, brought to us by nature, even if we've messed with it. So somebody might ask, why won't Measure B monies work for that? And if you're using why isn't the Flood Control District, which is a special agency, why aren't they helping? And then it's in the why is there not a Coastal Conservancy grant? So if you don't mind.
Well, I don't want to speak for the Parks and Recreation Department. Nancy Rapp is here, the director, as well as Joe Zachary. They could probably talk more in terms of Measure B money, but it's really a policy decision on council and the proper use of Measure B funds. But this is a pump facility, so it's not actual the creek. So we're taking care of the pump house and the associated parts of it that need to be addressed. In terms of grants, we haven't been able to find any grant funding source that could be used for repair. Typically, the grants that we're able to find is to put new stuff in, not repair an existing facility. Example, we've gotten a lot of money for bridge replacement, for example. It's taking something out, putting something in and new. We'll continue to look for grant opportunities for the ultimate project, which is basically completely renovating or replacing the pump station, but that's a number of years off. But we have a need right now to keep the pump station operational. We've just been fortunate that we haven't had a lot of rain. In terms of flooding problems, we have other issues with that. But I can remember a few years ago when we had in 2005 when we had a lot of rain. That place was really humming, and we just want to make sure it's safe for our employees.
And Madam Mayor, on the Measure B issue, we've had this philosophical and policy discussion with the council a number of times that Measure B is supposed to go towards new creek restoration and water quality projects and not to maintain existing facilities that really should be the responsibility of the city. And this is clearly an existing facility that needs maintenance, and so that's why I think Measure B would be a difficult source to go for.
And it's not the responsibility of the Flood Control District either.
I can speak to that. No, it isn't. It is a city facility, and the county's assessment is always looking for what is the top priority for flood control expenditures within the city, and City Council for many years has been Lower Mission Creek project. So first of all, it'd be very difficult to get any funds from the county for a city facility, and then they'd be looking for their priorities as also improving flood control within the major flood within the city, which is Lower Mission Creek.
And I remember the big rains when we had them, thank God, that the lower downtown area really does flood, and that's what this facility drains, correct? So.
That's correct. The lower downtown, the area over by where are the Public Works, Community Development, Parks and Recreation offices, United Way, that whole area down there is subject to flooding if this facility is not operational.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question. Is there danger at Kids World? Is the wood creating splinters? Or, the mayor joked that Kids World is not a kid anymore. So I'm wondering what...
that was an off-the-record joke. But
I'm
okay.
sorry.
It's all right. We'll let it go. There's no such thing as off-the-record up here, I suppose. Ms. Zachary?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Murillo, Kids World is 22 years old, and so although it's been very well maintained, we're currently in the process of having a structural assessment done. What we'd like to be able to do is actually replace what needs to be replaced without changing the design or function of Kids World, as well as bring it up to new playground safety standards and ADA requirements. So our goal is to try to renovate the facility without completely dismantling it and rebuilding it, and we're in the process of evaluating that right now.
Okay. And then my next question to Mr. Casey, did you hear that the Mesa Architects are asking for $400,000 for that roundabout? And so you have $700 up there. We can scratch off some money there. Were you aware of that?
We were aware of the request. It came in after we had prepared the report, and
Okay.
that's something for council deliberation discussion if you want to challenge them to go fundraise the remaining amount.
They said they were willing, so that's kind of good news. I think that's it for now, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, a question about the Montecito-Yananale Bridge sidewalk. We've been on a bridge building binge, and I was just curious, is that bridge structurally sound? Is it going to be around for a while?
Madam Mayor and Council, yes. And in fact, it's not a bridge. It is, by definition of Caltrans, a bridge is 20 feet greater. This is 19 feet. So it is not eligible for the highway bridge replacement and rehabilitation. So yes, it is structurally sound.
Okay, great. Let's see here. On to the Las Positas Cliff Drive roundabout. Mr. Bailey, we probably should have gone to one item at a time, but oh well.
I was going with what staff
You're
was
getting more
asking.
exercise than
Sorry.
I got today. So this project, the purpose of this project is traffic congestion relief at rush hour, correct?
Correct.
Remind me, what was the relative benefit of the inexpensive, essentially free traffic signal versus the more expensive, aesthetically pleasing roundabout?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Francisco, we look to what we call horizon year for our traffic, so we're looking ahead to 2035, what we expect traffic volumes to be. Traffic signal, intersection wide, we would expect a level of service C, or an average of 19.2 seconds of delay per vehicle. The roundabout would be a B, 12.9.
Okay. And the difference in cost?
Roughly $700,000.
Okay. All right. I think that's the only question I had about that. On the one to rebuild Gateway Median Island Parkways landscapes, so is this project needed to save water, or is this really purely an aesthetic project?
Well, it's actually, it could be considered both. One is an aesthetic project, because a lot of the landscape in some of the medians, especially on Garden Street and KC Chavez, is old. It needs to be replaced, especially Garden Street. And so we would replace it with more drought-tolerant plant material, and also put material in there that doesn't require as much maintenance. So eventually, so ultimately, we would be saving water as well by changing out the type of plant material we plant in there.
So what kind of, if you were going to some kind of xeriscape landscaping here, what kind of water savings would we be getting?
I'm not the expert in that area, but we'd definitely be working with the staff in the water conservation group to come up with a good palette that will save water. We don't want to have to be able to water every single day or 3 or 4 times a week, so water is minimum as possible.
And what about, has staff considered hardscape solutions for these places?
We've discussed hardscape. Obviously, there's an aesthetic issue, so if we were to remove the landscape and go with hardscape, we're going to have to go to the Architectural Board of Review, and probably, I think, for all the ones that locations we're looking at, and get their support and approval for going with hardscape, and I'm not optimistic that we would be successful in all cases.
Okay. Let's see. On the library plaza final design, could someone tell me exactly what this $100,000 is paying for?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, Francisco, sorry. Doesn't matter. It's taking a project through final design preparation and plans and drawings such that you're ready to submit for plan check and construction. So it's getting your final approval from the Historic Landmarks Commission, Parks and Recreation, and then also developing the design documents so that you're teed up and ready to go regardless of where money might become available, and so that we're flexible.
So this is doing the construction drawings?
Correct. We're getting close to getting a conceptual design approved, which is a big deal, and that'll be a good accomplishment. But then it's just developing the design further so that you're ready to enter into construction.
Okay. And then I had a question on the Lower Milpas pedestrian improvement design. Has there been any stakeholder input on this has there been input outside of staff thought on this?
No.
Wait a minute.
Okay. That's a good answer.
That I'm familiar
it's
with.
not necessarily a good answer, but it's a clear answer.
Actually, it did come up as part of the East Side Neighborhood Transportation Management Plan to include sidewalk on that side of the street, linking it to beach, as well as the Milpas group. They've also put in some input regarding putting on the sidewalk in that area as well.
And what was that input?
That they see valuable in adding the sidewalk, from both the residents on the east side as well as some of the businesses on Milpas Street.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for now, yes.
Mr. Hart?
Well, I think my colleagues have done a great job of asking the questions that I had, so I won't repeat those. And I also had the opportunity through all my orientation sessions working for the various departments to find out more about all these different projects, get up to speed. But Mr. Dewey did raise an issue regarding the police station air conditioning and heating process that I think would be helpful for all of our discussion. You mentioned that you thought you probably were going to be able to go forward with this project without this funding, but it would actually mean that other projects that you had planned to fund in future years might be delayed. Could you tell us what those projects are that would end up being delayed if this funding request weren't granted tonight by the council?
The projects that we had slated for FY15, the capital projects that would be delayed would be the Creo Gym spalling repair. So the Creo Gym has a lot of significant spalling to its structure. It's a poured in concrete building. It's something that we've been wanting to address for a long time. The library exterior paint, we're going to be designing an exterior paint scheme for the central library, and then we were going to roll that out. It's kind of an extensive project. We have another phase of the Muni Tennis Stadium repair. The Municipal Tennis Stadium is a wood structure that needs significant repair, and we're planning on doing that in several stages. So this would be one stage of that repair. The Public Works Corporate Yard repave, Phase 1. The Public Works Corporate Yard is in need of repaving, and so that would be delayed. Repaint Skaters Point. Periodically, we need to repaint the structure at Skaters Point off of Cabrillo. The Shoreline Park restroom renovation. So there's a restroom at Shoreline Park that needs some attention. That would be deferred. The next three have to do with the West Side Center, West Side Community Center. One is the auditorium roof replacement. That roof is in need of repair and needs to be replaced pretty soon.
You can't do all those things for $600,000, can you?
Yeah, sure we can.
All of those things?
Yeah.
Okay. Impressive.
The West Side Center refrigeration condensing unit replacement. There's some refrigeration equipment that needs to be replaced for the kitchen, the operating kitchen at the West Side Center. And we are also going to replace the exterior doors that are weathered and warped. And that's pretty much it for that year. And of course, we have a long list of deferred maintenance items, throughout the city. So it kind of just shifts the burden into the future a little bit, but it can be done. But as far as the priority right now of all of our projects, I think that the police department is something that we must do to keep that building habitable.
Okay, thank you.
Just since you're right there, Mr. Dewey, to follow up, if, depending on how it goes with this funding, instead of the $600,000, we put in $300,000. So obviously that would just mean that some of those items you mentioned would be deferred and others you could cover. Is there like a breaking point that, I mean, we may not get to that point, but it'd be good to know, like the top priorities ones on that list that would be deferred if we said no tonight. What would be the cost? Is it?
Well, I can give you, I should have given you the cost of each one of these, but let me run through them just really quickly. The Carrillo Gym spalling repairs, $26,000. The library exterior paint is $104,000. The municipal tennis stadium repair phase 2 would be $86,000, about $87,000. The corporate yard repave phase 1 would be $91,000. The repaint of Skaters Point would be around $20,000. The Shoreline Park restroom renovation would be about $40,000. The West Side Center auditorium roof replacement would be about $40,000. The replacement of the refrigeration equipment at the West Side Center would be about $40,000. And the West Side Center replacement of exterior doors would be about $32,000.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And then, Mr. Dewey, I know you keep coming back up here. If you can, I mean, not Mr. Dewey.
Madam Mayor, could I ask Mr. Dewey a question before he departs?
Go right ahead.
I realize that we're talking about capital here, and that's not the same budget as the operating budget. But can you give us even a rough ballpark of what kind of savings we'd have on the utility bills if we go through with this renovation at the police station?
This would be a really rough guess. I would imagine that we probably spend about $10,000, somewhere around there, on natural gas at the police department. So virtually all of that would be saved. The only natural gas usage that we would have would be for domestic hot water, washing hands. And electricity, we'd probably save around probably around $15,000, so about $25,000.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Hart, were you done? I'm sorry. Okay, did you had a question for Mr. Dewey? All right, we'll keep Mr. Dewey, and then I have a question for Mr. Bailey when I'm done with that. Go ahead.
I heard Mr. Casey say the word habitable. I want to know that the employees are comfortable in there. Are we saying that it's not warm enough when the weather's cold, and is it not cool enough when we need to use the air conditioning in there? I mean, that seems very important.
Yes, the system is 50 years old, and we do have a lot of complaints about temperature control, but we're really more concerned about ventilation requirements and things like that. So, I mean, there are some, significant issues with the ventilation system that need to be addressed. There's
fresh air for them?
Yes, yeah, ventilation air, yeah.
All right, that's important to me.
Any other Mr. Dewey questions? Mr. White and then Mr. Hotchkiss. Go ahead. Mr. White? Oh, Mr. Hotchkiss.
Spalling, he said.
Okay.
Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, in a poured and concrete building, when you have reinforced concrete, you have, steel rebar in there, and sometimes that oxidizes. When it does, it expands and cracks the concrete. And so you have concrete, you've seen it in older buildings and even at the Cabrillo Pavilion.
Yeah, I just wasn't familiar with the term. Thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. White? Mine are not, Mr. Dewey. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dewey. Okay, let me get a couple questions in. Mr. Bailey, just back to where you were talking about the Mr. Bailey, back to where you were talking about the roundabout. And you were mentioning the LOS B or C for the roundabout. You said that was intersection wide, but I think I want to make clear that depending on which way you're going, it could be very different whether you're with the traffic signal, if you're on Cliff Drive or if you're on Las Positas. Could you expand on that? Because it's not B every which way with a traffic signal, or C.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Yes, the numbers I gave before were an intersection average.
Right.
With a roundabout, roundabouts do a pretty good job of spreading the delay around the approaches. What people would experience with a traffic signal is the traffic signal is really going to favor the heavy movements. So that's the southbound left turn and the westbound right turn. And it'll sit in green for those movements most of the time. When other movements arrive at the intersection, they're going to have to wait until that traffic is served. So for example, during the PM peak, the westbound movement, someone coming down the hill and wanting to continue on towards the County Beach area, they could experience 50 seconds of delay, much higher than the 19 seconds overall average.
Would be an LOS what?
That's a D.
A D.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So I just want to be clear when you hear the average, that's helpful. Anything else for Mr. Bailey while he's sitting there?
I'm not sure if this is a Mr. Bailey question or not. The Montecito-Yananali Bridge sidewalk, do you want to talk a little bit about it? We're reducing a little bit the size of the lanes, the width of the lanes. Are those still going to be, I agree that this is a real problem. To get across that bridge now, you basically got to scamper and hope nobody comes. So, but are we going to make the lanes so narrow that we're, exacerbating that problem, even with the addition of the sidewalk?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, right now there's 12-foot lanes, so there's remnants of a curb on one side and there's a curb on the north side of the creek. It's 24 feet total between the two. We are going to try to maintain that 24 feet. It may have to go down to 22, meaning 11 in each direction. We don't want to give anyone the false impression that this is going to be a wide, expansive sidewalk or wide lanes going across this bridge. It's a reallocation of space. But we do feel that the safety improvement by adding the sidewalk is a worthy trade-off. So we could go from 24 down to 22.
Have we had accidents there? Do we know?
We have no record of any pedestrian-related accidents on the bridge.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So one question that I have about the roundabout is, how much time, what we've talked about in previous discussions is we have some time to accumulate funds to make our choice. How much time do we have? Does the existing grant, which is for, how much? Is it $800,000 that the existing grant is allocated for the stoplights? Is that right? Was that the number?
750.
700?
Yeah.
STIP money.
All right.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, the grant is for 2015.
Okay.
But we do need to begin design in order to be in a position to spend that money. So how long would you say, Pat?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember White, is that what we had presented in the past is that we have our grant is eligible on July 1st, 2015. That's when the funding is available according to the grant schedule that we have. So we have until now, the beginning of the coming fiscal year and the beginning of the 15-16 fiscal year.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. So we have a little bit of time to be looking for funds, but not much. We need to get going on design, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, we need to be assured that we have a concept. We don't want to yo-yo the concept. We need to decide, hey, are we going to do this or not? And then we'll move forward and design that.
Yes, well, stalling is different than yo-yoing, and so I'm looking for a way to accumulate some funds, and we'll talk about that when we get down the road. But okay, so thank you for that. All right, next question is on the median landscapes. There's $500,000 proposed for that. Could you describe what that list is? I mean, there's another situation where that's a reasonable size, a reasonable chunk of money. what's the number one, what's the number two, number three in that for triaging that particular activity?
Well, our number one island would be Garden Street from Gutierrez down to the railroad tracks on the south side of the tracks. That was done by the Parks and Recreation Department a few years ago with a grant that they received. Then the next one would be Calle Cesar Chavez to take care of that island. And then we would also want to replant some of the plants that have died off at the Milpas Roundabout, as well as the Hot Springs Roundabout and the medians leading up to it. We had some issues with how they were planted or established when they were first planted, so we want to replace those. But those would be our top three.
Okay, so the Garden Street one would be $100,000?
Figuring between $100,000 and $180,000. It's, I'm sitting down with the parks manager and my streets manager tomorrow to get a better handle on the numbers, but I would say safe to say about $150,000. But until we've actually hired a landscape architect,
I understand,
and design and all that, it could be less, it could be a little bit more, but I'd say in $150,000 range per island.
All right, so that's one that is segmentable. That could be divided down. And then secondly are the refuge islands. I noticed that it said Alisos Street. I didn't know, are these instances where there's, where's the safety level and concern? I mean, we completed the Yananali Street yellow blinking lights and the Ortega Street one on Milpa Street. How do these compare in terms of safety need?
Well, these are neighborhood islands. Mr. Bailey can discuss it, but we did do the neighborhood transportation management plan for the east side, and they identified some areas where they had concerns about being able to safely walk across the street. So following that, Mr. Bailey and myself and Ms. Grant, we got together to take a look at what we could or could not recommend for funding, and Derek can talk a little bit more about why Aliso Street versus other streets.
Okay, great. Appreciate that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, when we did the Flashers project almost over a year ago, really a different application. That's an arterial, higher speed type streets. We're now down into a neighborhood setting where it's harder to see, this tree canopies, parked cars. What we're really trying to do is enhance the visibility of intersections. Kind of raise drivers' awareness of this as a place where pedestrians frequently cross. We have an existing project that's funded through Measure A that's going to be installing 6 pedestrian refuge islands on the east side, and we were very deliberate about which crossing locations we chose for that. It was either immediately adjacent to the school or on school walking routes. Alisos is a very heavily used pedestrian corridor. After the school crossings, we felt this was probably the most important walking corridor on the east side. But if this is funded by council, what we would like to do first is just get those initial 6 in with the Measure A monies next to the school, evaluate them, make sure they're working as intended before we move forward with the Alisos installation. Okay,
so part of what we're hearing then is that there is a significant chunk of the refuge islands that are going forward out of that east side activity already. Mm-hmm. So, and this would be an additional chunk for that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. And let's see, anything else on the traffic elements? I think that's it on the traffic. And then finally, the Library Plaza. Mr. Hotchkiss, his first question was, are there pump priming activities? I had thought of that as a pump priming activity, partly because of the art museum being, you were mentioning the geothermal aspect. Could you talk about that a little bit, please? Is that how that would work?
Madam Mayor, council members, the art museum is going through a major renovation of their facility. I think close to an $80 million renovation of their facility, which is quite exciting and wonderful that they're going forward with that. Part of that is looking at their energy usage and how to more effectively use it. And they've identified a couple of innovative techniques that they would like to use the subsurface area underneath Library Plaza. And so we've been working and coordinating with them. They're not quite ready to move forward and don't know when they'll move forward. But one of the desires is to have a design done that everyone is happy with, such that if they do move forward, as part of the cost of installing the geothermal, they need to return the plaza to some improved condition, it would be great to have a plan to say, yes, return it to this, not to its existing condition. So I agree with you. This is one that's kind of setting us up for either grant opportunities or the Art Museum going forward, or maybe a jointly funded project with the Art Museum. It's unclear how we would finish it, but we'd like to get this in a position where it would be ready to be finished.
And then finally, another pump priming that I had understood is that the arts workshop building, again, that there was some priming money in there that for going to updating the plans, and that was at least one piece that would be making it available for the next step in any case.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we've been in negotiations with them about giving them the land at $1 a year, which is a pretty good priming the pump. They have about a $1.5 million project, and so they are looking for assistance from the city to kind of jumpstart that with the first $300,000, and then they would try to fundraise the rest.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Just to follow up on that, the RDA funding for the Community Arts Workshop was about $1 million. And part of this one-time money included our share of all the RDA money that we lost, but we get a portion back to the general fund. And on percentage-wise, it's 12%?
12 to 13%.
12 to
correct.
13%. Okay. So technically, 12% of that $1 million came back to us in one way of looking at it, right?
Yeah, that's fair. That's one way to look at it. You know, it's not quite a direct nexus because part of what we lost was future tax increment.
Right.
What we turned back was the cash we already had on hand in the bank.
Right.
And so the $1 million in the future for the Community Arts Workshop was probably coming from that tax increment that we lost. But it's one way of looking at it.
One way, okay. Yeah, it's a painful reminder anyway. Okay. And, Mr. White, did you have another question?
No, I didn't.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you for your patience. We wanted to get all that through, so we will have public comment, and so please come on up to the podium when you hear your name, and if you hear your name coming up next, please be ready to step up so we can be efficient in our time, because we have a lot of public speaker slips, and we have 2 minutes here, so Lee Moldaver, I think, left, and he is saying yay to roundabout is a great long-term value. Okay, so yay for that. Sophie Graham will start, to be followed by Ginny Brush. Come on up, and if you want to put that mic down towards your mouth there so we can all hear you, that's great. Good evening.
Hello, City Council members and Mayor. My name is Sophie Graham, and I am 10 years old. I am in 5th grade, and I go to school here in Santa Barbara. And I am here to tell you why I think the Children's Library should be built, and here are my reasons. One of the first reasons I think that the library should be built, keep building the Santa Barbara Children's Library, is because it is important that other students and little kids should learn to read at a young age. As much as I appreciate the one we have now, the one downstairs will be better for various reasons. For example, the littler kids will have more of an area to read and maybe have the chance to be a little louder. The older kids will have a wider selection of books, and it will attract more attention to the library because it will be more interesting, have more space, and be better altogether. I have talked to some of the kids at my school, and they believe the downstairs library will be better too. And here are some of the things they said. It will be bigger and have more space for the other kids, said a 5th grader. I think it will be better for the kids to read in a more comfortable space, said a 3rd grader. I really believe it would be better for there to be more books for the other kids to read, because I read books through so fast, said a 6th grader. So, now that you have heard that you know that I am not the only child to want this library, but there are other kids who enjoy the library too. I also believe it will give kids a chance to accomplish their dreams and for others to support them. I hope you will take all of these ideas into consideration because they are very important to myself and my fellow classmates because the library is a great place. Thank you.
Well, you've seen the bar has been set for public comment. Thank you, Ms. Graham. And Ginny Brush, you will be next. Kathy Janega Dykes will be following Ms. Brush.
Tough act to follow. Madam Mayor, members of council, I'm here to speak in support of the request for the $300,000 to support the realization of a community arts workshop space. This was something that was envisioned in the mid-1980s, that this is the one little last piece of the Regional Arts Master Plan. As you know, as you've heard, we did receive ideal contribution of redevelopment agency funding for this, and we were very disappointed to see that go away, getting that close to doing it. At the same time, we've had approved plans for the workshop at that time as well that had been approved by Historic Landmarks Commission. This delay has required a need for the plans to be updated, and in spite of the loss of that funding from the redevelopment agency, a dedicated group of individuals, the Community Arts Workshop Task Force, have been working closely with dedicated members of Solstice and the Arts Collaborative to develop a business plan for the space, a phased-in approach for the space, and so that this could be something with this funding could help us show that the committees, the City Council's support for the project, and would encourage, I think, the necessary private funding that we would need to realize the overall space. But this would be a significant shot in the arm to help start getting this on the track to move forward. Thank you so much.
Kathy Janega Dykes will be followed by Diane Duva.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Kathy Janega Dykes. I'm CEO of Visit Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara South Coast currently attracts over 6 million visitors annually who spend about $1.5 billion, a significant part of our local economy. Collectively, our hospitality industry spends millions of dollars also annually attracting these visitors to our area. Our goals are to ensure that our visitors have a positive experience, encourage them to stay longer, and again, return to our community. And if you look at our current wayfinding program, our signage program, you'll see that we do not have a unified signage program throughout our community that identifies our parking, our primary, and our secondary attractions. I urge you to support a $250,000 allocation to begin this process. And here's a few more benefits. Wayfinding signs with consistent designs link our neighborhoods. So Waterfront would be linked to downtown to Milpa Street, which also has a number of visitor attractions. They also can encourage pedestrian walking as well, too. Most wayfinding signage includes directions to nearby attractions that builds attendance at those attractions, and particularly the smaller, less-known attractions as well. And consideration should also be taken into really promoting our historical and popular red tile walking tour, as well as our scenic drive. That is certainly an asset for both our visitors and our locals as well. And then finally, I think you'll find a strong collaboration between Visit Santa Barbara, the City of Santa Barbara, Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Association, the Greater Santa Barbara Lodging and Restaurant Association to work on this project. Thank you.
Diane Duva will be followed by Zora Charles.
I am not Diane Duva.
No, you're not.
Diane had to leave, but she asked me to read her remarks.
You'd state your name for the record.
I'm Janice Pegram.
Okay.
Thank you. Dear Santa Barbara City Council, I urge you to prioritize the Children's Library project in the funding cycle with at least a $500,000 commitment. As I have stated in the past, it is important that private donors see the city being committed to this project. To date, the library has raised over $2.1 million of our $5.6 million goal from private donors. These donors are under the impression that the city would be providing significant support as well. The city needs to send a strong message that this is, in fact, a private-public partnership. Currently, the 1,500 square feet, known as the Children's Library space, is woefully insufficient for the size of our community. My hope is that you fully support this project, and the Children's Library will be 6,300 square feet with a state-of-the-art facility soon. With your support today, you will take a large step in helping Santa Barbara maintain its great community status, since all great communities have great libraries. Thank you for your consideration. With gratitude, Diane Duva.
Thank you. Zora Charles will be followed by Martha Townsend.
Mayor, Councilman, I love Santa Barbara, as do you, and we have a fabulous community here. And this is the first time I've ever been to council, and I am very, very impressed. that you are taking the time and the energy and really looking into these issues. But I've always had a dream. I was the Friends of the Library president in the 90s and the early 2000s, and now I'm on the foundation board to raise funds for the Children's Library, because that was my dream, to move that small, dark space down to the lower level. People don't think that children read anymore, but I'm here to tell you that they do. My husband and I, Les, have a small family foundation, and we have put 2 libraries in, one in Boys and Girls Club and one in Girls Inc. on the east side. We support these libraries, and it's like the movie Field of Dreams. If you build a library, they will come, and they do. I'm sure you read to your children. I'm sure you know how important literacy is for getting our community out of poverty, and we start with our children. We're investing in our children. And if you have these libraries that people come to, they will come, the children will come, they will be there to explore, they will be there to have help with their homework when maybe their families can't, which we do at the Boys and Girls Club and Girls Inc. You have literacy begins with availability. If we have a wonderful library available, they'll use it through family, school, libraries. So I would leave you with this. I always say this to people when I'm asking them for help with the library. Think about your early library experience. I'm sure we all have them. And how important was your local library to you? And don't we want to share that with the kids of our community? So join me in my dream, and please support us.
Thank you. Martha Townsend will be followed by Krista Pleiser.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Martha Townsend. I'm a past president of the Junior League, and I was involved in the strategic planning process when we identified the Children's Library as an unmet need in the community. Now I want to share a personal story. My first language was Spanish. It wasn't English. And I was in kindergarten in the Los Angeles Public School District and spoke no English. At age 6, we moved to the suburbs. My parents worked very hard to get us there, and our neighbor, a 5th grade school teacher, took us every Tuesday to first get a public library card and then to move on. And she helped my mother while she was cooking and coming home from work. Every week, we would turn in a new book. Every week, we would come back and we would continue to read the books, and that's where I discovered pleasure reading, is through the public library. Interestingly, while my siblings who didn't have this experience ended up needing remedial tutoring. According to a 2012 report from the World Literacy Foundation, children with parents who hold professional jobs have heard 33 million words by the time they begin school, compared to 10 million words for children from more disadvantaged groups. I was one of the lucky ones. Illiterate people are more likely to be on welfare or unemployment or drop out of school. In various nations, estimates show that 60 to 80% of prisoners have reading and writing skills below basic levels, and upon release, illiterate inmates have a higher probability of reoffending. I attribute my love of reading to the library access I received as a child and the gift of a neighbor. The library presents one of the child's earliest encounters with lifelong learning. When children are inspired at an early age to discover and explore, their worlds expand, as mine did. And Santa Barbara is known for its leadership and innovation.
You wind up, please.
Yep. With many nonprofits and et cetera, and Nobel Prize winners here. We ask for your consideration of the support of the public library. Thank you so much.
Krista Pleiser will be followed by Crucito Herrera Cruz.
Mayor Schneider, council members, my name is Krista Pleiser, and I'm here as president of the Friends of the Santa Barbara Library. We're here today to encourage you to allocate $500,000 to the Children's Library Project. President William Jefferson Clinton once said, "Literacy is not a luxury, it is a right and responsibility. If our world is to meet the challenges of our 21st century, we must harness the energy and creativity of all our citizens. This includes our children. Great communities have great libraries, and it is our responsibility to create a safe, nurturing place for children to discover their love of reading and expand their horizons. This is such an important project because for a community our size, the current library space allotted for children and their programs is woefully embarrassing. We only have 1,500 square feet, while other communities have at least twice as much of this. The renovated space will have 6,300 square feet of bright, sunny space, which will stimulate the imagination and creativity of our youth. The renovated space will have cozy reading nooks so people can explore their imagination. They're going to have spaces for performance and for story time and for music, and also modern technology, including accessible computer stations. The community knows this is an important project, and it has already raised $2.1 million through major gifts from donors and grants, and the Friends have contributed $50,000. These individuals and foundations who have contributed to this project expect the city to make a commitment of at least $500,000. Please take a portion of these one-time monies and invest it in the future of this community by allocating $500,000 to the Children's Library Project. Thank you.
Francisco Herrera Cruz will be followed by Elizabeth Slot. I think that's pronounced correctly.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members, and the public in general. Buenas tardes a todos que están escuchando en la casa. I'm here in the position of, it'd be very supportive of district-based elections. In the infrastructure improvements, we're talking about needs in our community. The west side part of Santa Barbara, the east part of Santa Barbara. I'm totally in favor of improving the infrastructures. Line items that reflect the east side and west side improvements. Why? It creates more of a healthy community, a more vibrant community. And when we look at the shortfall of the requested items of $8,075,000 in comparisons to what was given to $4,356,240, there's a shortfall. Mr. White, priming the pump, we have access to something. The trough, the public tourism dollar. In TOT taxes, when we talk about generating 8.7% in increase, a 9.7 percentage increase on a yearly basis, we have to look at the trough. The person right before me has asked that we make $1.5 billion. So if we were to have a long-term and short-term goal in economic development, in measure, in sales tax or TOT tax, we could recoup it for all these projects. Look at the eclectic rainbow of Santa Barbara, because this is one issue that affects all of our community, and that's why it's important to look at the economic streams of economic improvements and the consideration for economic development through a sales tax, a TOT tax. Es muy importante que invierten dinero de nuestros fondos del municipio a nuestra comunidad. Es muy importante. We shouldn't be marginalized. No los ignoren, por favor.
Thank you. Elizabeth Slot will be followed by Matthew Levine.
Hello, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm here also to support the Children's Library. As we all know, literacy is everything in education. And our city, the families of our community deserve this. From 1,500 square feet to 6,000 square feet is going to be phenomenal. I am personally the major gifts chair for our campaign. So with your support, it will give me the credibility and backing to ask the very few people in our community who can give major gifts. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Matthew Levine will be followed by Leon Olson, and then Bruce Giffen after that.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and the City Councilman. My name is Matthew Levine from the Fest Parker Resort. I'm here to speak on the support of the wayfinding funding this evening. For a city that offers so many attractions and relies on tourism, we feel the need to have a proper, consistent, citywide signage directing tourists to our wonderful attractions. With most of our competitive cities providing proper signage to their guests, this is one more way for us to stay competitive and be competitive. Having proper citywide signage will decrease the frustrations that most of our guests have, and frankly, without it, it's doing a disservice to our community. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Leon Olson, be followed by Bruce Giffen, and then Geo Chapman will follow him.
Madam Mayor, council members, in 1977, I came to Santa Barbara, and 2 weeks later, I attended my first summer solstice parade. Since that day, in one way or another, I've been involved with helping Summer Solstice try to get a yearly venue, and we feel like we're getting close to that. And I want to give special thanks to all of you who've listened to us and heard our pleas, and I think are supporting us in this venture. And I want to give special thanks also to the City Administrator's Office and Nina for the help that you've also offered us. In the issue of pump priming, in those words, I would think that we see what we're asking for is an investment from the city of Santa Barbara. The $300,000 starts us off on a $1.5 million project that is a capital improvement, that is an investment in your building, and I believe that these buildings at this moment are probably not usable, and a parking lot might be a use for them, but probably not a very good use for them. So in order for these two buildings to be used by anybody, certain things are going to have to be done, and certainly the hazardous material mitigation, which we intend to do and follow the letter of the Santa Barbara County Fire Department regulations, that we will perform that. Feels like that this is a benefit to this property and to the city, and we ask that you help us if you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce Giffen, be followed by Geo Chapman, and then Deborah Pontiflex will be after Mr. Chapman.
Madam Mayor and members of council, I'm Bruce Giffen. I'm on the board of Elings Park and also on the Milpas Community Association, so I'm here from the west side and the east side. I'm in favor of the Las Positas roundabout. That is certainly more efficient, and as we know that the air quality will be better with cars not having to idle as much as they would with a signal. On the other gateway, the Lower Cabrillo Ball Field, it would be great to continue along with the renovation and transformation that we've seen in the last few years with those improvements. Lastly, I'm completely in favor of anything to do with east side safety, from the bridge to the improved lighting to the pedestrian islands. And after seeing the COPS HVAC systems, that's scary. That needs to be addressed. So thank you.
Mr. Chapman, and then Deborah Pontiflex, and then Michael Nelson.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm Geo Chapman. I'm here to speak in support of full funding for the Cliff Las Positas roundabout. And I'd also like to thank you for supporting the roundabout in prior council decisions. Full funding of the roundabout will signal to staff and the community that the environmental and safety benefits of the roundabout are paramount, that the safety of pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers are important to the livability and attractiveness of Santa Barbara, especially at a location that attracts coastal recreation visitors from all across the community and beyond. I trust you'll see the roundabout funding as seed investment, an investment in an innovative traffic engineering solution that is being implemented across the nation because it saves lives, saves travel time, and eventually saves real money. A full funding of the roundabout is an investment in the lives of the citizens of Santa Barbara. It is essential to knock-on improvements such as the trail along Las Positas that is being proposed and access to adjacent parklands, including the county beach. Full funding will allow staff to move full throttle on the roundabout and consider bicycle pedestrian safety improvements along Cliff Drive. These are all desirable knock-on effects of the roundabout funding investment. This roundabout is not only a travel nexus for coastal access, it can be the seed for improvements that will add to our quality of life and the livability of our great community. Let's plant that seed for a better Santa Barbara. Full funding for the roundabout. Thank you all.
Deborah Pontiflex, and then Michael Nelson, and then Barry Remus will be after that.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. I'm Deborah Pontifex, again with the Friends of the Library. I'll try not to repeat what others have said, and there have been a number of supporters here tonight. By making the commitment of at least the $500,000, you will send a strong signal to the private donors that this is a citywide project and has the endorsement of the whole community. Others have mentioned how woefully inadequate the size of the current children's library is. I have a couple statistics here that I think are very telling for local communities in our area. Santa Maria's Children's Library is over 9,000 square feet. Ours at 1,500 square feet. Camarillo's Children's Library is 10,000 square feet, and Ventura has one that's over 11,000 square feet. I think that you have a good chance of supporting this project tonight because it's high up on the list, and I encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Nelson, be followed by Barry Remus, and then Leslie Wiscombe.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Michael Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of the Elings Park Foundation, and I'm here tonight to encourage your favorable consideration of funding for the roundabout. The foundation has long supported improvements at this intersection. In fact, we have a number of engineering drawings and landscape plans that we'd be willing to share with staff and the Mesa architects to make this project a reality. Thank you.
Barry Remus, be followed by Leslie Wiscombe, and then John Kelly.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Barry Remus. I'm with COAST, the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation, on their Safe Routes to School team. And the good news is what I have to say won't take much time. Even better news is what I will say is going to rhyme. There are lots of ways to spend our money, a wish list that may never stop. But making our city safer, that should rise to the very top. Our neighbors should be able to walk safely at night with ease. So let's fit our east side streets with brand new, long-lasting, energy-saving LEDs. Our children, including those seated among us, should not be in danger walking to and from school. So let's put in the missing sidewalk over the Yananali Street Bridge. And the kids might then say, whoa, that's super cool. Crossing the street shouldn't be a risk, especially for those needing more time. So let's add curb extensions and refuge islands to reduce both their trip across the street and motorist wait period. Now, really, is that such a crime? Rush hour backups clog Las Positas and Cliff Street every day, increasing our carbon emissions. So let's replace that blinking red light with a roundabout and improve motorist, pedestrian, and cyclist traffic and safety conditions. You have so many good choices before you, but really only one decision to make. Where is our money best spent? Safety matters, so let's do it for safety's sake. Thanks, and good luck. We're all counting on you.
Leslie Wiscombe will be followed by John Kelly, and then Dennis Thompson.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of City Council. I'm Leslie Wiscombe. Excuse me. And I want to thank you for your commitment to the roundabout at Cliff and Las Positas. This is going to provide long-term relief and be a safer option for vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists alike. A group of us has formed a roundabout committee, and we view this as a community project. The roundabout will serve those traveling to regional facilities such as Elings Park, Arroyo Burro Beach, and the Douglas Family Preserve. As well, it will be safer and more environmentally friendly intersection that serves 4 elementary schools in our area, as well as Santa Barbara City College, our Mesa Business District, and many surrounding neighborhoods, including Hope Ranch, Samarkand, Veronica Springs, Hidden Valley, to name a few. Without the city's significant support to supplement the grant funds are currently available, it will be difficult to find other sources of support. So we're asking you to please fund the roundabout to help make this intersection safer and more efficient for all users. And then I'd like to switch hats for a minute. As a Parks and Recreation Commissioner, I'm also here to ask you to fund 2 very important park projects. The Milpas community has enjoyed tremendous positive momentum over the past few years. And I hope that you will support the $455,000 request for Cabrillo Ball Field improvement to continue this positive momentum. This site is a gateway to our city. And now that the chromatic gate is restored, the site deserves final upgrades that improve appearance, safety, and enhance recreational opportunities. Finally, Kids World is 22 years old, and this popular playground needs some major work to make it safer and improve accessibility. The $250,000 request will go a long way in obtaining the additional funds necessary to make these improvements. Thank you for your consideration of these three projects.
Thank you. John Kelly will be followed by Dennis Thompson and then Tom Patton.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm John Kelly, and I'm a member of several volunteer groups, including the Mesa Architects and the Roundabout Committee. We're very pleased, the community is, and grateful that the City Council has committed to building a roundabout at this intersection. It will be significantly safer and more efficient than traffic signals. The intersection is the western gateway to many Santa Barbara coastal neighborhoods, parks, and shopping areas. As Leslie mentioned, it doesn't just go to the Mesa. It goes to Arroyo Burro Park. It goes to Yankee Farm and Hope Ranch. It goes to City College. It connects all of those with Elings Park, Victoria Springs. So this is a major hub that is really far along in the process here of getting where it needs to go. We depend on the coast for business and recreation. Whenever possible, we should improve our coastal access so our community can continue to thrive. Let's embrace this opportunity to improve safety and traffic flow for all the Santa Barbara residents and visitors who use this western gateway to our coast. I urge you to commit the full $700,000 from the one-time funds so this project can be designed and built in a timely manner and start serving the community right away. Thank you.
Dennis Thompson will be followed by Tom Patton, then Larry Reniker.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. You've got a lot of wonderful projects in front of you, and I know tough choices. But I would suggest that one of the prime functions of local government is to guarantee mobility of its people. We need help getting to work, getting to school, getting to recreation, and so I would encourage you to support the two primary neighborhood mobility projects, which are the Cliff Drive Roundabout and the East Side pedestrian improvements. Thanks.
Tom Patton, and then Larry Reniker, and then Dennis Power.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and fellow City Council members. I'm Tom Patton with the Ramada Hotel and have been involved with the various tourism organizations over the many years and have seen and heard firsthand the frustrations our visitors have had trying to navigate our city. We all know how vital it is that our tourists are able to navigate Santa Barbara to utilize our businesses and visit our cultural attractions. That is why I'm here tonight in support of the $250,000 for the wayfinding signage. We all have been to cities that have good signage programs. We've been to ones that have had bad ones, and we all know what sort of experiences that we've had. We want to make sure this is a positive experience for our visitors and locals alike. Thank you.
Larry Reniker, and then Dennis Power, and then Scott Wentz.
Madam Mayor, members of council, my name is Larry Reniker. I'm here to support the roundabout at Cliff Drive in Las Positas. My family's lived on the Mesa for 25 years, and I've worked in Goleta. My kids went to San Marcos High School, so I've gotten to enjoy that intersection at least 1,000 times, literally. In those 25 years, I've counted over 100 cars backed up at that intersection. As you probably or may know, that intersection's had a service level of F for at least 20 or 25 years. Approximately 12 years ago, because of that congestion, the intersection was targeted for a roundabout in the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan for $750,000, and 12 years later, it still hasn't been built. Because of the 12-year delay and no increase in costs, the options you've been given are the traffic light on the roundabout. I think as other people have said, the data shows that compared to a traffic light, roundabouts are safer, they're more efficient, they result in lower pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and they're less costly over the long run. A roundabout would also serve the rural nature of that area, just aesthetically pleasing, as the Architecture Review Board indicated last week. So to sum up, I recommend that you provide the funding to get the roundabout built. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Power, Scott Wentz, and then Sebastian Aldana.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I'm Dennis Power. I'm here as a member of the Ealings Park Foundation Board of Trustees, and we have seen rather steady growth of activities on the weekend and after school. We see a continued steady growth in many of the activities for the youth and families of our community, and I strongly believe that the Cliff Las Positas roundabout will definitely help move those families through more quickly. I'm also a Mesa resident. I probably use that intersection an average of twice a day, if not in my car, on my road bike. And I must say that I also see the impact of cars stopped there, which I don't think is going to be ameliorated much by a signal. There was talk earlier of the decrease in time that one would spend at a roundabout versus a signal. And I want to point out that, yes, there is a savings in delay and a savings of time, but there's also a savings in air pollution. As you all know, with cars sitting there spewing exhaust, the fumes in the area are increased. And as a bicyclist, I would like to say that I would rather smoothly and safely move through a roundabout than come to a stop. Reference was also made that this project may only cost $400,000. Again, as a Mesa resident, I had not heard that. I have heard, however, and seen the budget for a $700,000 supplement. If only $400,000 is granted, I would worry about where would the other $300,000 come from to get that project going. And finally, if full funding is awarded to the roundabout, I would like to put in my 2 cents for the signage project. Citywide signage, I know, is definitely needed to improve wayfinding. And I must say that when I first came to Santa Barbara in 1972, I noticed some wooden signs to the Botanic Garden and the Museum of Natural History. They're still there. Thank you.
Scott Wentz will be followed by Sebastian Aldana and then Naomi Green.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Wentz representing Cars Are Basic. We are opposed to the roundabout at Cliff Drive in Las Positas. As a matter of fact, we've asked in a letter that you've already received, and it's part of the city attorney's record now, that it be tabled, not even be discussed. You have a problem. The city of Santa Barbara has stipulated more than once at different roundabouts and at different locations that roundabouts are dangerous to pedestrians and bicyclists. Matter of fact, it's a proven fact. You have statistical evidence proving that roundabouts cause accidents to pedestrians and bicyclists. You have another situation going on here. The city of Santa Barbara has not presented a plan for the roundabout. Therefore, you're putting the cart before the horse. You haven't done an EIR. You haven't met CEQA. You haven't done a lot of things that are in the letter, and we expect the city of Santa Barbara to fully match those before you spend one dime on it. The takeover of Cliff Drive and Las Positas is another stupid move, which is part of one of the situation for the roundabout at Cliff Drive and Las Positas. You're going to add $500,000 to the annual street budget. The city of Santa Barbara staff has already said you're only funding 30% of the budget, 30% of what you need for streets, and yet you want to add this? You have huge problems, and tomorrow we will be presenting at public comment our answer to the roundabout. Thank you.
Sebastian Aldana will be followed by Naomi Green and then Abby Fragosa.
Hello, Madam Mayor, City Council. My name is Sebastian Aldana. I'm the chair of the NAC. And we met on January 15th. At the meeting, they made a motion. And as Paul Casey mentioned, the NAC that the NAC support the city administrator's office recommendation to City Council, provided that these items in the respective neighborhoods of the Neighborhood Advisory Council members get priority, including not limited to the items already included in the applications for CDBG funds. There was an amendment to the motion that additional funds be provided for further lighting improvements in the east side and also west side. And it was 8 to 1. That was the final vote. And it was the top 12 projects that the committee voted for. And being the opposing vote, I want to make a minority testimony. I respect the recommendation made by the NAC. However, being a representative for the East Side, the past 7 years, appointed by the mayor and city council, 4 years with the Franklin Advisory Committee, and 3 years with the NAC. Hearing the complaints and concerns regarding lighting and knowing the high need, I strongly recommend including a lighting study added to the East Side Transportation Project. Per Public Works, it would cost $125,000. It was a CDBG request last year, but it was not funded. I ask that you take strong consideration to include a proper East Side lighting study. Without the study, we cannot move forward to resolve the lighting problem East Side residents have had for many years.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Naomi Green will be followed by Abby Frangosa and then Eva Imbar.
Madam Mayor, council people. Thank you. My name is Naomi Green, and I'm here to support the proposals that grew out of the East Side Transportation Committee. In other words, the lighting improvements, the bridge, and the pedestrian refuge islands. And as a longtime East Side resident and also a member of the NAC, I've been watching the development of the East Side transportation issues. I think now it must be over a year and a half. And I'm delighted that it's gotten this far and that it looks as if we may actually have some of these improvements which are desperately needed. And lighting was the when I attended the workshops run by Public Works, lighting was the #1 priority for the East Side residents, as I'm sure you know, because it's a walking neighborhood and lighting is crucial. I can't go out at night without my little flashlight. It's an LED flashlight, but still, that's how dark the neighborhood is. And I think it is a question not only of a viable neighborhood, but it's public safety. It's true for seniors like me with eyesight is no longer what it was. It's true for people who use public transportation. It's a neighborhood that uses public transportation, so you have to get from Milpas to wherever you're going because the buses run mainly on Milpas, not all on Milpas. For children, of course, and also public safety in that darkness encourages activities that you don't always want. And there are dark corners where I avoid, and I'm sure other people avoid, which means that be much better served for the neighborhood for all purposes if it were lit better. So I urge you not only to support it, but to look upon this as just maybe the beginning of a larger lighting improvement on the east side. Thanks very much.
Abby Frangosa will be followed by Eva Imbar and then Anna Rico.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I am here in support of the East Side Lighting Project and improvements to that end. I know that the purpose of it is to retrofit currently the lights with LED lights, which will be a great boon for the city in making those savings. But a concern of mine is that, again, we do need more lights, as other public members have mentioned. Another concern I do have is that it seems that a lot of attention is being given to the area that's to the east of Milpas Street, and I'm concerned that the area to the west of Milpas, like Ortega Park, Gutierrez heading up to Garden, those areas might get overlooked when it comes time to consider providing more light And I do have experience in this. I live on a very small street that has one light for the whole block. It's very close to the corner of Haley and Quarantina, where in very, very recent years, that prostitution has been a problem there. It's been very convenient for that business to come around the corner across the street from my house and conduct business there. And it has not been pleasant. Myself and my neighbors have gone to the additional trouble of leaving our lights on, our porch lights on, and taking that expense upon ourselves. So in addition to local law enforcement, that's really cracked down on that. That's been great for us. But we all have dogs now. So it's become something that we feel has been left to us in our neighborhood. And I'm sure other neighborhoods feel the same way. And not just with issues of prostitution, but other unsightly issues. And in addition to that, I'd also like to advocate for the Cabrillo Ball Field. Those renovations, there's just so much that space can do for the community. It really can become a gateway for tourists to come into Milpas and see all the new wonderful things that are happening there, as well as the community of Milpas to head towards the beach. And I know I don't have to tell you how impacted the east side is. It's difficult it's difficult for people to get out and be active in a small area where you don't have a lot of space. So I would like to give my support to that as well. Thank you.
Eva Imbar, be followed by Ana Rico, and then Angela Bell.
Good evening. I'm Eva Inbarn. I'm with Coast. We believe at Coast that the essential function of government is really to ensure the safety in the streets. So you have so many good projects here. They're all good. And to set priorities will be very difficult. So we believe the priority should be, or one of them, to have those projects go forward that promote safety in the streets. That's our public space. So we support the roundabout at Cliff and Las Positas. And we support the whole package of traffic safety improvements for the east side with all three components, the lighting, LED lighting, and the refuges, and the sidewalk on the Yanolali Bridge. I particularly want to thank all the east siders that came out and are too shy to speak. They're here. They're kids that have been phenomenal. My kids would never have been this well behaved. So I really want to recognize them. Thank you very much.
Ana Rico, followed by Angela Bell, and then Rich Unterman.
Hi, my name is Ana Rico, and I want to let the parents that are here with me show their flyers to show you who we are. Por favor, si lo pueden levantar. These are the parents who are being involved with us. They are involved with the community. They do want safety. They do want to, they are involved with us, basically, and they're here to support us and to let you know that Project 15 for the sidewalk for the kids, I have a parent and her two kids who use that every morning to go to school and come back. It's really dangerous for them. I have number 3, 4, and 5, the lights, as you heard. It's really dangerous during the areas, and we do need it. Number 4, the bridge, because on Yanonali and Montecito, a lot of people and a lot of kids use it to go. They cross that to get to the APS hill to get to Cleveland. There's moms who use it to come down, go to work. It's being used a lot, and like I said, it's a timing kind of thing. You either go first or the car comes, or the bus is coming and you have to wait so you don't get run over. We try to avoid it as much as we can, but there's certain times that we do need to use that way because we have to go to the doctor or we have to get to an appointment for the dentist, the doctor. There's Franklin Clinic right there. There's also the library right there. So there's a lot of parents that do use it, and there's a lot of kids that use it. And some of these kids, they're coming from their house using that path to get to school with that supervision. So that's another thing. Number 5 is the refuge islands. I think it would help, especially for us who have a stroller that sometimes we have to take our times with our little ones walking with us. It would help us be more safe. Thank you.
Angela Bell will be followed by Rich Unterman and then David Van Hoy.
So,
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I started to work on the safety of Cliff Drive when I was 65. I am now, yesterday, 83.
Happy birthday.
Okay? So up until this time, the city, it's been a non-issue for the city to fund anything on Cliff Drive because it was a state highway. So the city was not responsible for funding anything. It has funded every other neighborhood in Santa Barbara, but it has never funded Cliff Drive. So I am asking that you fund the roundabout so that we can have a safer Cliff Drive. I live in a senior community right off Cliff Drive and watch the traffic go by. So please, fund the roundabout. For the first time, you will be funding Cliff Drive. Thank you very much.
Rich Unterman will be followed by David Van Hoy and then Claudia Bratton.
Thank you. I'm Rich Unterman. I support the traffic circle. I don't usually support car things, but I am supporting this because the traffic signal was such a stupid idea that it just really does need all the weight that it can get. And lots of people have talked about that, so I'm not going to talk about that, but I'm going to talk about another issue. There are so many things that need to be done that I think on each of these projects, we need to really sharpen our pencils to get as much for the dollar as we spend. I believe the cost estimate that they propose is way too high, and that if we had a very, very sharp designer and we kept it simple, we didn't make it look like Milpas or Coast 1, but we made it look more like the circle out by Peabody School, a really elegant circle in the middle of the road. We don't need to landscape it heavily. This is an area that is all natural landscape. It's grass and oaks. It's green in the winter and it's yellow in the summer. It can landscape itself. We don't need to deal with drainage because it drains already. We don't need to put lots of curbs in. We don't need to worry about sidewalks because nobody walks out there. There's a nice, adequate bike lane. There is a good sidewalk that goes on the water side from the neighborhood down to the beach, and it works, and it should be safe. We don't need to build more yet. We can build those at some future time. Just get the circle in, keep it simple, keep it landscape. I guess it's time to go. Thanks.
David Van Hoy, followed by Claudia Bratton, and then Rod Hare.
Madam Mayor and Council persons, I appreciate the time to speak with you all. A couple things, and I'll be brief. One thing is I believe in the next month or two that Cliff Drive in Las Positas is going to become officially a part of the city of Santa Barbara. And a couple things that I think are above some of the other issues in terms of that you need to consider would be safety and transportation, access to other parts of our city. And from a safety standpoint, you've heard a lot about the safety of roundabouts for both automobiles and cyclists and so forth. The transportation connection, the ability for people to get around Santa Barbara and go from one place to another. This intersection serves people from all over the city and even outside the city for getting to the two parks and the preserve and the beach access and so forth, and City College, and you've heard all of that as well. As usual, Mr. Unterman is, I think, onto something, and he's part of the roundabout committee that we've been working on. And it seems to me some funding that would help out and add to and make more value to the $750,000 that is already allocated for the roundabout. The idea is to do what we can to bring the price down and do what we can to do any fundraising or come back to you next year to try to fill the gap to get a good project. That area out there is very rural. There are no buildings around. It's very wonderful. It's natural landscape materials. There's been a restoration project in the slough from a few years ago. I don't think we need to gold plate this project. I think it's a quiet a place to get cars through and to get people through and get bikes through and to go someplace that they want to go in the things that are offered in that very nice valley area. So that's my 2 cents worth, and I think it's a project worth endorsing on your part. So thank you very much.
Claudia Bratton will be followed by Rod Hare and then Michael Holliday.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I've been the Executive Director of Solstice for 14 years, and you all have known that we struggled to find a space, and we were so excited when the city said, how about this space? And that was back in 2005, and they said, you can't use it this year, but you can start next year. And it will be a space not just for Solstice. That's the important thing. Solstice will be in there maybe 3 months of the year, but the rest of the time, it'll be just this amazing resource for all the arts organizations. As you know, in the 1980s, the Bailey Report identified that this was an important thing to have a backstage to Santa Barbara. Now, because we were ready to go, we had our HLC approval, everything in 2008, and we just got halted. So what we need to do is move forward, and we're more than willing to take this huge thing on, including the chemical remediation of the soils and stuff, which is a little scary for me. But if you guys could give us the jump start, then this will also help us raise funds, because as you know, we're going to have to raise over $1 million to do this. And not too many people want to give money to governments more than they have to every year. So this will be a sign that the city is really behind this project, and it will go on for years and years. And I want it for my grandchildren and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And it'll be something that will really be something to be proud of. And I thank you for all your efforts on our behalf, especially this gentleman. Thank you.
Rod Hare will be followed by Michael Holliday and then Eric Friedman.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Rod Hare. I'm one of the co-founders and past president and current member of the board of the Santa Barbara Arts Collaborative, and I'm here to speak in support of the $300,000 for the Community Arts Workshop. Finally, a permanent home for Solstice. This is a project whose time has come, and you've just heard from folks who could have said that a decade ago. Could have said that 2 decades ago. I've been at this for 4 or 5 years, and I'm the freshman here. I'm the newbie. There are folks who have given decades of dedication to see this happen, and it's time that we do it. When we got to the altar, when we had the $1 million committed, we were so close. We were so close. That was a devastating blow for this effort, but we didn't quit. We didn't give up. There's been a task force that's been meeting regularly ever since then, and what we did is we broke this into phases. So this is now a 5-phase project, and what we're asking for tonight will help us complete phase 1. And this is an important leasehold improvement. When we go out to the community and ask for donations, and there's any whiff of things like environmental remediation, you can understand how difficult it is to raise that money. So this is so important. These are all leasehold improvements to a property you already own, but it will help us so much in that next phase, and we'll be able to demonstrate what this can be to the community. We'll be able to have events there. We'll be able to show the potential of what this can be. So please give us that $300,000 and let us keep working on this, all right? Thank you for your consideration.
Michael Holliday will be followed by Eric Friedman and then Paul Poirier.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Michael Holliday. I'm an architect and also a partner in the Synergy Business and Technology Center. And I'm here today to speak on behalf of the local entrepreneurial community. Several of the City Council members suggested I come down and make this pitch. As you may have heard, the City of Goleta recently has stepped up with a $150,000 pledge to seed fund the Goleta Entrepreneurial Magnet, and I'm actually working with them right now and helping to roll that out. That was matched by UCSB matched them with $150,000 and a local entrepreneur. As well, the City of San Luis Obispo has a nonprofit entrepreneurial center called the Slow Hot House in downtown San Luis Obispo, and the City of Ventura has done the same thing. So right now, Santa Barbara is kind of the donut hole. for entrepreneurs. And we've been approached recently by a local entrepreneur who says, why don't you get City of Santa Barbara to step up and do the same thing, and I'll give you the seed funding to make it happen if you can get the city to come along. So that's what I'm here today to ask. You have a million choices up there, so many great projects, but I'd like to make a pitch for the local entrepreneurial community here. If we could match the any amount of funding that we can receive from this would be greatly appreciated. We have the Santa Barbara Entrepreneurial Center, which we'd like to expand down in the Vercal building. And really, we want to do it as a nonprofit to keep the costs as low as we possibly can for everybody. So we think the future is that every city is going to be doing something for the local entrepreneurs in their city. Santa Maria is doing it. San Luis Obispo is doing it. City of Ventura is doing it. Goleta's doing it. And we'd love to see the city of Santa Barbara come up with some level of support so that we can make this nonprofit venture a real reality in Santa Barbara. We've got the support of Santa Barbara City College, the Workforce Investment Board, the Santa Barbara Chamber of Commerce. Goleta Entrepreneurial Magnet is actually supporting this as a nonprofit network for the whole Central Coast. The Economic Vitality Corporation of San Luis Obispo, and a number of local colleges. So we'd encourage you to support this in any way that you can. Greg Hart knows a little bit about it. And I know, Helene, you're going to come down and check it out, and Kathy's been there. So thank you. We'd encourage and appreciate anything you can do to help out the local entrepreneurial community. And also a little shout out for the downtown signage program. We think it's really important and very much needed.
Thank you. Eric Friedman, and then the rest of the speakers, Paul Poirier, Henry Sharp, Sharon Byrne, Ken Oplinger, and Robert Burke.
Good evening, Mayor Schneider and fellow council members. My name is Eric Friedman, and I'm here in my capacity representing your City Library Advisory Board. And the Library Advisory Board supports the Children's Library, but it also fully supports the plaza renovation. We've been working on that for a number of years. And it's important to realize that libraries are the place where our past meets our present to build our future. And tonight it happens to be that the 7 of you are both its present and its future based on the decisions that you make. As you deliberate, it's important to keep in mind that these two projects, while they are different, they are part of one unified vision for the library and what it will become in the future. And our vision at the Library Advisory Board is that it becomes part of the newly enhanced cultural arts district that's taken place that includes such renovations and new buildings as the New Vic, Alma del Pueblo, the Granada, the Museum of Art, and the iconic courthouse. And with this vision that includes both the plaza and the Children's Library, the library itself will become a focal point of this area. So the Library Advisory Board appreciates your consideration of both these projects that together will enhance potential public-private partnerships and opportunities, and in turn will make our library of the present the magnificent library of the future. Thank you.
Paul Poirier.
Madam Mayor and council members, I'm here, Paul Poirier, architect in town. I was the architect for the Community Arts Workshop, and I'm here in support of the $300,000 for that project to get off the ground. Most of the plans were done in 2007, 2008, totally permitted, ready to go. We just needed the money, and then they discovered that some soil cleanup from the old auto pool from the city had never been cleaned up, so they wouldn't let us pull the permit. While we were waiting for that whole process, soil remediation plans, soil management plans, the redevelopment money that was donated for that project was taken away by the state of California. So pretty frustrating for the group of people who had been working on it, more frustrating for the people who are going to be in there. But the money that we're asking for now is really to just bring it to a minimum health and safety standard so that they can have art events go on there. The Solstice would be able to use some restrooms that are ADA accessible. We'd be able to do some structural repairs to the buildings. So the soil remediation involves certain types of construction to seal out the things that are in the soil. Permits, site work, trash enclosures, gates and fences to enclose the property. It's nothing fancy or even building worthy. It's really just the bare essentials to allow people to get to the site, see the vision for what it could be, get inspired, and donate some money so that they can fundraise. And having worked with these folks since 2008, when the whole thing sort of unraveled, I believe that they can put it together. They have a larger, stronger coalition of art groups together in the Arts Collaborative. And they're all believing in the vision, have a sounder business plan than perhaps they would have if they had the money that would have come from the redevelopment agency back at the time, and I think it's going to be a successful project. So that's that project. The other project I want to talk about was the police station. We did a feasibility study for the police department on the existing infrastructure and whether they should build a new police station, how much it would cost to renovate, structurally upgrade the existing station. And I could tell you that the mechanical systems are just really insufficient in that structure at this point. And really, Jim is just scratching the surface on repairs that need to be done in that building. You might say, why throw bad money after good?
Wind up, please.
But if you decide not to put a police station there or any other city facility and sell that building, it will need an operational HVAC system. And so it's money well spent. You're going to be saving some money on some utilities, and you're also going to increase the value of the property.
Thank you. Henry Sharp?
Good evening. My name is Henry Sharp. I'm here in support of item number 6, the grant for the Children's Library. My wife and I moved to Santa Barbara in 1981, but and built a house. But then we moved to Samarkand a little over 3 years ago. And soon after that, I became a volunteer in the 3rd grade at Adams School. One of the things that the teacher has me do is listen to the kids read. And I help with pronunciation, at least I think I'm helping, and try to explain what the words mean and how they fit to situations. I've been amazed at the difference in skill level from the better readers to those that are the slowest. And anything we can do to encourage them to read, they've all heard about the library, but I remind them about it and encourage them to get a book for the weekend and get better. But anything we can do to help those kids learn to read, we should be doing.
Sharon Byrne?
I'm the executive director of the Milpas Community Association. I'm actually here to speak to you on a number of projects, but I first want to let you know that you're in serious danger of actually restoring a whole lot of people's faith in local government, because a lot of the projects that you're talking about tonight, we were discussing in the early part of last year after coming through a lot of pain points on the Cabrillo Ball Field, pedestrian safety on the east side, lighting. Madam Mayor wandered around in the dark with us one night on the Lower East Side looking at how serious the lighting problem is. And to see it go from a year ago discussion to actually being on the verge of being funded is really, I know, fast. And we really appreciate that. It's pretty impressive. Would like to put in a vote, please, to continue with the renovations in the Cabrillo Ball Field. As others have stated, that is a gateway to the city. We would love to see that be a really vibrant, recreational, really thumping outdoor facility. It's beautiful Santa Barbara real estate. Why shouldn't it be used to its utmost capability? All of the pedestrian projects on the east side, lighting, the refuge islands, and particularly the Ananelli Bridge, we very much support. We've gone walking with Coast on some of these, and we agree with that this needs to be a priority. There are 5 schools on the east side. 3 of those are elementary, and they're all in the zone being considered for the improvements. So it's really important to make it very safe, especially for the little kids. I want to offer a clarification on Lower Milpas. The area from Calle Puerto Vallarta to Cabrillo Boulevard is currently grass and is not really navigable. And as Mr. Allen, I think, pointed out, that is front yards and just lawns. The area north of Calle Puerto Vallarta is hardscape as is. And to put a sidewalk there would definitely impact an existing business there, and so that would need to be thought through really carefully. But below Calle Puerto Vallarta, that would be great to get a sidewalk there. And finally, I'd like to make you an offer. It's not going to be as good as the Mesa Architects, but if we're going to do landscaping improvements at the Milpas roundabout, if that's part of that package, we would be happy to volunteer to help remove the landscaping, because we would like to put in a community holiday tree, a live one, and we would be willing to pay for it and put it through the permit process. Thank you very much.
Ken Oplinger, and then Robert Burke will be the final speaker.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Ken Oplinger from the Chamber. I just want to speak on two items this evening, items number 8 and number 10. First, on item number 10, the wayfinding signage. As someone who is a recent transplant to the community, I can tell you that it is difficult, and I would suggest, as my counterpart Kathy Jacob-Dykes has recently said, that you put yourselves in the shoes of those who come to our community and don't have a lot of knowledge of it and try and get around and find things. It is very difficult. The city has recently shown its support for very high-quality signage with the temporary signage program that we have when the cruise ships arrive. That just started up in January. That signage program is outstanding if you haven't seen that in action. And I think that sort of signage program on a permanent basis throughout the community would be helpful, not just to visitors, but to residents as well. Briefly, on item number 8, I can't speak to the whole package, but I can tell you that we had over 200,000 visitors to the visitor center at Garden and Cabrillo just this last year. The vast majority of those folks coming off of 101 and up Garden Street. If you haven't driven that recently, I would argue that's probably, if you had to pick a spot, the spot you would say is the gateway to the community, and it definitely needs some improvements in the landscaping. So anything you can do to help city staff get that into a place that really is a welcome to our community, I think would be outstanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert Burke.
Madam Mayor, members, I'm Robert Burke. My remarks are not prepared and spontaneous tonight. I depend upon memory and past research. I attended early workshops on the library plaza. I remember hearing the library director say once, and only once, that one reason for the plaza was to eliminate the homeless from habitating the plaza. The library is not a hotel, or a restaurant, or a resident, or a resort. I encourage using zoning and not money to resolve these problems. Use civil law, not criminal law. Using taxpayer money to resolve an unaddressed social justice issue by creating user-hostile architecture, which can be resolved by creating new and enforcing current ordinances, is unacceptable. Eliminate or place in last priority the Library Plaza project until unspoken challenges are discussed. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the public comment. Thank you all. There's quite a lot there. Do we have some questions first? Do we want to stretch, or we're keep going? I guess we keep going. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I just am impressed by the public testimony and the great work that the staff has done. This really is an extraordinary opportunity. It doesn't come along very often. I'm trying to think back when I was on the council previously. One-time money coming from the sky does not happen regularly. So this is an important decision, and I think that staff has done a really good job to set this up for us. I kind of look at this in a variety of different categories. I think the first things are kind of the must-dos that we need to do just to maintain our infrastructure and be responsible as the stewards of the city's resources. And the fire department's microwave link, the Laguna flood control channel, even though it didn't make it through to the cut list, I think the police department's HVAC system is in that category as well as the road maintenance. But those last two items, I think, there's other ways to get there. And I think that Mr. Dewey's suggestion that there's a way to do the police department HVAC system this year and to defer some other things in future years is not a bad way to look at that. And then also in terms of the road maintenance, I had an opportunity to meet with the Public Works staff to talk about that, and it's certainly a daunting problem. But the contribution that's proposed is truly scalable. I mean, it isn't as though we have to spend the entire $500,000 to meet that need. We can look at that, I think, as something flexible. The other absolutely great.
Mr. Hart, I'm going to interrupt you because I think, but before you go through your laundry list, why don't we figure out how this is going to work, and then because I think we have a work session sheet, and then we can figure that out. Sorry, I didn't realize. I thought you had a question. So, Mr. Casey did, and I think why don't we just get some final questions done first before we start deliberating. But Mr. Casey, can you tell us first what you envision up here on the sheet so we can all follow along at the same time?
Madam Mayor, council members, it's, exposing making sausage. That's what we're talking about now. What we have here is an active Excel spreadsheet that you can move projects around, you can change dollar amounts, and you can see the running total of what is funded and what is not funded. The exact process about how you wanted to go through there, I'm happy to give suggestions, but we didn't have a defined process about how you'd go about kind of massaging
So
this
let me
spreadsheet.
make a suggestion here. There might be some follow-up questions. Let's get those answered first. I would suggest we zero out everything. So forget the recommended and unfunded because we know what your recommendations are, and then perhaps we should just go around and one by one, after questions are answered, just go down and give your top priorities, and we'll see where there's common interest and see if we still have money left over. We still have to talk about sidewalks. Good luck to the sidewalks after all of that. But I think we'd still need to do that. So does that make sense? In that way, okay. So just for questions to clarify first, Mr. Hart, did you have any questions?
Don't have any questions.
Okay. Ms. Maria.
Thank you. If I could ask a question of the Mesa architects, please, because I see you still out there. I've pulled up the email signed by you all saying that you were going to ask for $400,000 at this meeting. And I'm sorry if you recalled that or if you're now going for the 700. I'm asking for a clarification, and I know you're not representing all the Mesa neighborhood or everybody who lives there. You're taking the lead in some of these issues. You said you have a roundabout committee. So can you clarify, please?
Certainly. As you know, Leslie Wiscombe, who spoke before, is on our working group. We call it a working group, roundabout committee, whatever. We've been discussing fundraising options. I think in some optimism, we thought we might be able to raise a lot of money. You look at each option, and it's not nearly as viable. People in general, we talked to philanthropists, we've talked to foundations. People don't seem to want to pay for public works projects. That's not a very attractive thing. We thought about a raffle. That doesn't seem like a very attractive. Hiring a fundraising manager director. I don't know how far we'll get. We may raise $50,000. We may raise $100,000. So the more we can get, the less we'll have to raise. I think that the clearest thing we could probably help finance is the landscaping of the site.
So when you wrote your email, you were in a different optimistic frame of mind?
We hadn't had any meetings yet. We hadn't had much discussion. We'd heard some comments from various members of you that essentially you're not going to get 700, so we thought we'd ask for something in between. But in fact, I don't think it's very realistic that we'll raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, unless any of you got any ideas of where we'd go for that. We've gotten a lot of no's.
I think we're in the same boat as you. So.
Okay.
Other questions? No. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Casey, on the plug number for the signage design for the downtown, for the directional signage program, I realize just a plug number, an estimate for design only, and the project itself would be probably another $600,000 or so. But I'm curious because I've been around for a lot of iterations and desires about what this sign program might entail, be it just off-freeway signage, downtown kiosks, whatnot. What is the scope of this? And if we determined that, where we would go? Because there's a lot of stakeholders involved in this, a lot of the business groups, neighborhoods, historical society, people like that. And to me, almost the plug number is a cart before the horse situation in some ways, unless you have something in mind about the scope of what we're doing here. Mr. Allen, maybe you.
Madam Mayor, I'll take a first stab, and then Mr. Allen can kind of follow up on the scope. I think part of the reason we want to bring in a design professional is to answer a lot of those questions that you say. There are people who do this for a living. There's some science to the art. A number of communities have gone through this, and so there are people who have yielded a path that we can follow. And we'd like to bring in that professional assistance to help us facilitate that discussion about what we want the signage to be, where the appropriate locations are, what are the types of venues you should be putting on the signage, how does it get you from point A to point B, C, D, and E throughout town. And So we want to build off successes of other communities of doing that and bring in a professional to do that. I think if we try to develop that at the staff level, we'd be starting from ground zero with not a lot of experience and knowledge to pull from.
But I've gotten input from different stakeholder groups over the years, and I was involved with the waterfront signage program as well as different iterations downtown. And I'm just kind of wondering, were I the one hiring this consultant, what would I tell him his job would be? And that to me that seems a little gray. So I don't know. Now, once again, I realize it's just a placeholder number, but I'm a little unless there's something more. I mean, I get what you're saying, but we're not another community. This is Santa Barbara, and we definitely have very specific desires and of what signs should and should not be.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember, totally agree. Our program is going to be different from other communities, but the basic concept is still the same. We want a citywide signage program for locals and visitors alike to major destinations throughout town. And so that, in a nutshell, is what your request for proposal to your designer is. We'll certainly pull other proposals from other communities and build off that, as I said. You know, Pasadena, Santa Monica, Monterey, their signage program is not a lot different from what ours is going to be. Ours is going to have a Santa Barbara-centric design approach. It's going to have Santa Barbara destinations and that sort of stuff. But it's not that unique that it's completely, we shouldn't even look at what other communities have done, because I think there's a lot more similarities and differences. But of course, it's going to be tailor-made. I could see us having a committee made up of representatives of the different entities who spoke tonight so that their input is received as well. I think there's a lot of way to kind of shepherd all this energy and interest into a program that works, but I think we need to bring in that design professional to help shepherd us through that process.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was just thinking more of the stakeholders prior to the consultant, so we can really scope what we want to do with this.
And again, I think that's true. We can get their input. I don't think our stakeholders necessarily are going to scope our process for us, because they haven't really developed citywide signage programs as well. I know Kathy Janega Dykes has participated in other communities in their design process, and so we have that experience to pull from.
Thank you, Ed.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Nothing more to add.
Good job, Mr.
Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Allen. Did you have
No,
anything?
I really didn't have anything to add. I think Mr. Casey covered pretty clearly. And again, having a consultant come in to help work with the various stakeholders is very important to have a successful process here.
Great.
So let me just follow up on that if I could. At the end of $250,000, what do we get?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and council members, what we hope to get is a design that works for our community, locations, identify what the destinations that are on the signage and stuff, and the real cost then comes in with the fabrication, installation, and implementing the thing.
Do you really think that will cost $250,000?
To do the preliminary, the design
What you just described, yeah.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay, different question then. For the Gateway program, the landscaping, et cetera, well, I was looking at Garden and some of the other places, and it seems to me right now the biggest problem is that they just look shoddy and they're not kept up. And that's a maintenance issue as opposed to a replacement issue. So if we have that program, it seems to me we could clean up certain areas pretty well without and freeing up some money in the meantime. Do either one of you want to comment on that?
Well, there are some areas, we'll take the Milpas Roundabout and the Hot Springs, where it definitely needs better maintenance.
And Garden Street.
Garden, we have done some work on Garden Street. It's like Garden before Gutierrez Street, so between Coda Street and Gutierrez Street. We did some work there where we trimmed back the vegetation and all that. But some of the vegetation there is pretty old. It's pretty much met its life expectancy and does need to be replaced. And not everything in the islands are drought resistant. And does require water, because part of the problem we're seeing out there is not getting enough water, because we've had some issues with the irrigation lines getting damaged by vehicles, so we have turned the water off so we don't waste water. So that's another problem we're
Well, if we have the funds you're talking about, you could work with that, correct?
We will do what we can do with the amount of money the council allocates. We will start with Garden Street and work our way through and get as much done as we can possibly get done.
Okay.
And I just add on a parallel track, and we'll be discussing this with you at your budget discussions on February, was it the 8th or the 10th. We're also looking at trying to enhance our efforts in the maintenance end, because the city has not over the last few years, many years, committed enough just ongoing maintenance monies to maintain a lot of these median islands and parkways.
Right, I agree completely. I'm just wondering if we could, with maintenance, improve things significantly rather than replacement. Derek, can I ask you a question, please? One of the speakers talked about simplifying the roundabout. It doesn't seem to me that I'm not sure where pedestrian matters fit in there. Most of the pedestrians are along the beach side, I think. So was he just being optimistic, or really are there simplifying possibilities?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, with respect to the pedestrian facilities around the roundabout, pedestrian facilities and bicycle facilities are actually one and the same around the roundabout. How roundabouts work is you have bike lanes along the side of the road, and as they approach the roundabout, there's typically a little slip ramp, so bicyclists who's not comfortable riding around the roundabout can actually move up onto the sidewalk. So while you're absolutely right, the existing sidewalk and majority of the pedestrian movements at the intersection right now are on the south side. We feel it's important to incorporate facilities around the entire roundabout to serve cyclists. Probably won't be as many pedestrians until such time that we get pathways connected to this intersection. But in terms of what facilities should be there right now, we think safety-wise it's important to accommodate the cyclists when it's built.
You think there's some flexibility in the $700,000 figure? Fat, as it were? As dangerous, I know, but I mean, might we discover that? Let's put it that way.
We've stripped out as much as we think we possibly can.
And just as a reminder, you may recall that when we originally brought the project to you, it was $2.2 million, $2.3 million, and at your direction, we went back, we reduced the size of it, we basically took out most of the landscaping to get down to the price that we're now talking about.
Right, I'm just trying to squeeze a little bit more, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
On that note, though, if we don't fund the full 700 right now, it's not even going to be scheduled to be constructed for a couple of years. So we could, for example, put $400,000 tonight with the commitment that in a future budget we put in the balance of whatever that balance is.
That's correct. And all you have to do is have all the money appropriated before you let the contract, award the contract.
Right, and we're looking at 2 budget cycles from now before that happens. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so just to bear that in mind, that it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, but if we put any money in today, it's saying that we're committed to find the balance of it at some point, but we can stretch that out over time. Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Holliday was mentioning this entrepreneurial thing, and not thing, it's like amazing thing, but all these things that are happening in different cities. Have you received a proposal yet, or anything that's in detail about what's being asked for?
No.
Okay, so that might be, I'll just put out, that might be something that we can look at in future budget cycles, but maybe if we don't even know what the proposal is just yet.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the refuge islands, if I read correctly, and I heard you say earlier, there are a number of refuge islands on the east side that's already funded through Measure A that's going to go through this year. And so what's being proposed tonight, if funded, won't even be implemented until maybe 2 years from now or a year and a half from now. And you want to analyze first to see if the ones that were already funded work. So I guess the question is there a rush right now for the 110,000, knowing that we're not even going to implement them for over another budget cycle, or is it something that we want to, what's your recommendation here?
Madam Mayor, I recommend we build the Measure A refuge islands first that are on the school walking routes, and that we analyze their effectiveness. I guess from our perspective, the challenge is, if they are effective, how do we fund more moving forward? And we don't know of any other potential funding sources until the next Measure A cycle comes around in 2 more years.
Or a capital budget in a year. So this is more like you have the money, you're going to secure it, but it won't be really utilized until end of 2015.
That's correct.
Okay. Just to put that in. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, I hadn't quite finished. I didn't.
Oh,
make
I'm
that
sorry,
clear.
Mr.
No, that's
Hotchkiss.
okay.
Go right ahead.
Just additionally, on the east side street lighting, which was the figure of 280,000. I guess, Mr. Allen, I need to ask you that. Sorry to make you do musical chairs here. If, heaven forbid, we only could finance half of that, is this a pie that cannot be divided?
Well, Mr. Dewey's here too, but
okay,
we'll do what we can do with the amount of money the council gives us. You know, the number we came up with was to address all the streets that the residents on the east side identified as having a problem or wanting better lighting.
Right.
So that's why we came up with the number we came up with. Obviously, we'll do what we can do with the amount of money that the city.
And we could put it off till more for next time, whatever.
Right.
All right. I'm just trying to get money to satisfy a lot of different things here. Mr. Dewey, do you have something to add?
Councilmember Hotchkiss. I mean, the way that we laid this thing out is that it was something that we could do simply and easily and to address the issues quickly on the east side. And it really wasn't made to be, phased or anything like that. At least we didn't approach it like that. And, of course, it is possible to, reduce its scope, but it wasn't really fitting with what, the plan that we were after.
I understand. Do we lose economy of scale or, additional crew problems or whatever if we didn't do it all?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Francisco, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think Mr. Aldana is here anymore, but he's obviously been one of the most active people pursuing the public interest of the East Side neighborhood for many years. And I wanted to understand, he was talking about a lighting study for $125,000. Can someone there explain to me what that is and what it would do?
I'll let Jim explain what it is, and I can maybe piggyback on why we're not recommending it at this point in time.
Okay.
The lighting study would study the whole East Side neighborhood for a new city-owned street lighting system. So it would be using our current lighting standards and going in and installing a system kind of like what we did on the Lower West Side. And so the study would just basically plan an effort that would really ultimately cost the city around $10 million to complete. And so, I mean, the way that we really looked at that was that, okay, it would be really great to have a plan to do that, but, what is the possibility of getting funding for that, and what would that look like phased over time? And we felt that, this approach that we, had, this particular lighting approach is probably better to get something done right away. And then we can also look at the technology, look at the improvements that we've made, and then we could better plan in the future for a city-owned lighting system.
Yeah, Mr. Dewey did touch on it. The biggest problem was the estimate for how much it was going to cost to implement that lighting study if we were to go forward with it. So it didn't seem like a good use of public monies at this point in time to do a study for a $2 million project. So we figured we would do this as an interim step, see what we have, and then identify the streets where we might need to do additional work. Mm-hmm. And then maybe in those cases, we could apply for community development block grant monies or look for other grant opportunities to address block by block in future years to address where some of the holes are. But we didn't think we would be able to generate $10 million to do a complete neighborhood area.
Okay, I see. And so in this $280,000 plan, this is all LEDs, correct? And so the mid-block lights, are those going to be on Edison poles?
It really is going to be a combination of a few things. It's going to be a combination of taking the existing lights that are provided to us by Southern California Edison that are high pressure sodium, changing those to LED, increasing the number of SCE-owned lights to existing utility poles that are already free that don't have a light on them, and then retrofitting the city-owned lighting systems to LED.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. White, question?
Thank you. Is the
Cabrillo ball field renovation scalable? Are there partway steps on that?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember White, it is scalable in terms of we wouldn't, for example, look at doing interior renovations of the restroom as part of the project. We would pull back on looking at other lighting for the park, for example. But key to this project is looking at the section between the chromatic gate and the active ball field and really determining how can we increase active recreation here as well. And then what do we need to do to ensure a safety, because we want it to still be a ball field, as well as provide another function. So that's where the fencing issue comes in. So once you sort of take that, you can't step backwards. And part of our effort will be confirming with community members and stakeholders exactly what they'd like to see in that extra space. We may need to be doing some additional drainage work, additional grading work because of its location as well. And so we get into that point where you could scale it back a little bit.
Can you give us a sense of, we've heard other instances of, chunks. What's chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, I would assume that we could scale it back $100,000 for the interior, the restroom remodel, and that we could look at the challenge is not knowing what we would take to provide the infrastructure improvements to expand recreation. So I'm reluctant to sort of jump in and say, oh yes, we wouldn't need to do this. The other thing we could scale back is not looking at the irrigation system for the entire park, which we would like to do if we were going to renovate the entire park. So we could scale that back as well, and that could be on the order of $80,000 to $100,000, depending on.
So a half a loaf could get something
Could get
constructive
something.
done.
We would still need to address irrigation, but we could scale it back. I would add, if I could, we do have new ball field pole lights that were put in last year, and we did do some initial storm drainage work. So we have been chipping away at making improvements there, and this would take us further down the path.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Some process suggestions.
Yes.
I've been thinking of your question. A couple options the way you could do this. One, you could go project by project and kind of get a sense of council as to the support and just kind of start working your way down the list. Another way is you could do, like you do appointments to advisory boards and commissions. You could just go council member by council member and tell us where your priorities are, and then we could tabulate up and kind of get a first cut like that. Or someone could make a motion and you could all react to someone's kind of first take at a full list.
I think the middle one is probably the best. So I would suggest go back to Mr. Hart, since I interrupted you before. If you could, and obviously if you have comments, that's fine, but basically go look at the sheet. And I think the message is, if we don't put something in our top priorities, that doesn't mean we don't like the project. We're just trying to figure out how to make it all fit. So Mr. Hart, why don't you start?
Thank you. I guess just to be real specific, I would support fully funding the fire request in item 1 and item 2, Laguna Flood Control Channel. Moving way down the sheet off the staff recommendation, I think we should move forward with the police department HVAC, but I don't think it needs to come out of this funding. I think we can ask Mr. Dewey to kind of reprioritize his large list of things to do. And I also
Madam
think...
Mayor? Can I just, to clarify that, if you're not recommending funding, we're not going to put a check next to the project.
Correct. That is exactly right. The road maintenance, I think, is really important, but I'd love to have us talk a little bit more about the scalability of that. The East Side projects, I fully funding the street lighting, the Montecito Yananali sidewalk, the pedestrian refuge islands, and fully funding the Cabrillo ball field renovation. I think those are all really critical. The Children's Library and Library Plaza, my father would, where he is resting, would never allow me to even hesitate to fully fund those projects. Those projects dear to his former library director's son's heart. No pun intended. Citywide signage, I think that's really important. People don't know how to get around, and this is a great start to making that happen. To me, the Las Positas Roundabout truly is a public works project. We can't really expect the community members to do big scales for public works projects. But I am intrigued with the ideas of seeing if there's a way to trim some of the landscaping costs or others using Santa Barbara Beautiful or other creative community organizations. And to me, the Community Arts Workshop is something that I was a big advocate for when I was on the council previously. I think this is really time to fund that project. That $300,000 is a leveraged investment. We can get this project going and have those folks go out and raise the additional money. So to me, the thing that falls off the cut list is the Gateway and Median Islands, and I think that is definitely something that needs to be done, but I don't think it needs to be done right now, and it's absolutely scalable. So if you followed my recommendations and you drop that project off the list, you would have the money for the Community Arts Workshop, and you'd still have $200,000 that you could do something with in terms of median islands. And so that's what I would recommend.
Did you say citywide street pavement repair or no?
Yes,
you did.
$500,000, although I'm certainly open to if
Right.
folks would like to play around with that at a little smaller number and reallocate other funds for other things, I'd be open to that discussion.
Okay. Why don't we just go down the line here? So, Mr. Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I certainly support the upgrade to the microwave links for the fire department. That's a necessity. And I support the east side lighting improvements, and I support the sidewalk on the Montecito Yananali Bridge. That's a necessity. I think I agree with you, Madam Mayor. I think we can wait on the pedestrian refuge islands, see how the ones that are already funded work out. So I would cross that off the list. I have long been a proponent of the Children's Library remodel, and I think that's an absolute necessity. I want to talk a little bit about the roundabout. I know everybody's heard me on this one. I know what they think. And I have a great deal of respect for the people here who are ardent supporters of the roundabout. However, I think this is a great venue to look at this. The roundabout is the most expensive item on this list at $700,000. And this is a greatly scaled back roundabout. No landscaping, it's small, it's narrow. I know that the ABR, when they saw this, they were dismayed. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the claims that people have made about the roundabout. It will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, that might be. But a signal light would also reduce greenhouse gas emissions over what's there right now where every car stops. It would reduce idling in any case, whatever. In terms of safety, I frequently go through the Milpas roundabout and the Hot Springs roundabout. I don't think either one of them are safe for cyclists or for pedestrians. That's that's common sense reality to me. Pedestrians are taking their life in their hands when they cross the crosswalks on the Milpas roundabout, and I see that every day. In terms of the improvement for the traffic, and years ago when we were talking about this originally, before we knew that we would one day have Cliff Drive, and the cost of the roundabout at that time was described as being much lower, I was totally in favor of it. I agree it's a perfect solution in terms of reducing traffic congestion. But, as Mr. Bailey said, the signal light will reduce traffic congestion as well, and that is, after all, the point of this. And when we're looking at all of these difficult choices, because every one of these projects is good, every one of them is valuable, every one of them has value to the community, if we could cross off the most expensive project on here and not really lose very much in terms of what we're trying to achieve, which is a reduction in peak hour traffic congestion, I can't see the logic of going forward with that. So that's why I will not support it. And it's not from any hatred of roundabouts. It's because I think the problem we're trying to solve is well solved by something that adds zero cost. And that's what we should be doing. Anyway, onward. So if we were going to do any of these gateway medians, I would agree that the Garden Street one is pretty poor looking, and I would support that, but not the others. And the Library Plaza final design, I think that's important to finish that. This has been a long time coming. We should do that. And I support the the renovations to the police department, HVAC, and that thing. I believe the Kids World renovation is important. I believe the Community Arts Workshop is important. So those, and I'm not even sure what all those things I just said add up to.
We'll find that out.
But those are my.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Francisco, did you have Laguna flood control facility?
I did not.
You do not. Okay.
I do not.
Okay. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you. I support the fire request, the Laguna flood control, and these are all at full, the number that you're asking for. All of the East Side transportation projects. I strongly support the matching grant for the children's library remodel. And about the roundabout, respectfully, I agree with you, Mr. Francisco, but we already had that talk and you and I were voted down. I remember originally I was for the traffic signal and everybody wanted the roundabout and the community wants the roundabout. So, you know, I know when I've lost my argument. So,
well, we've lived to fight again.
And I see the benefits of the roundabout, and I was doing the money thing, and okay, we're going with the roundabout. I'm sorry that you were premature saying you think you could have raised that money, you guys, and I'm just giving up. $700,000, fine. Yeah, I mean, I can't. I don't know if I can challenge you to raise $100,000. I was here trying to do the numbers. Maybe I could say $600,000 for it. I don't think so. I think we need the roundabout. This council wants it, and I'm going to go along with you. I want credit for going along with you. I guess it's at 700, and I'm not that happy about that, but okay. Make it good, and make it good for the pedestrians and the bikes too, okay? And with all due respect to the gateway median and the city signage uniformity, I love you business people. It seems to me an aesthetic thing, and our city has so much natural beauty, and the signs are functional already. And maybe what we can do is when one of them falls down and then you rebuild it, make it uniform then. It just seems like when I look at the breathing air for the people who work in the police building, that has to come first, okay? And flood control and these other things. So I'm sorry, those are zeros for me, respectfully, and I'm sad because I like you guys. Sorry. I want full funding, $500,000 for the citywide street pavement, please. I like the Library Plaza final design. Sorry, Robert Burke. I'm up in the air about the Cabrillo ball field, with all due respect to the advocates for that. I walked down there with my pit bull recently. It's beautiful. Those aloe vera plants have the orange flowers, and I know it turns into a wetland when we have rain. Please, let's have rain soon. I'm just saying, to me, it's a little rough around the edges, but I'm not right now supporting the Cabrillo ball field renovation. I would rather see money go to the pedestrian improvements on Lower Milpas. Mr. Casey, I was trying to go down the line. So yes, to the HVAC. I really support the Community Arts Workshop. Can you squeeze that higher for me somewhere? That's almost after, well, it's before the roundabout, but on your list, I guess it's after the roundabout. Okay, is that clear? Okay, thank you.
Good. Mr. Rouse.
Well, I'll take flood control for 500. Good. Okay, let's just see how good my math was here. So, going with the full funding for the fire digital upgrade, funding for the Laguna flood channel, the East Side improvements at 280, 433, and 110. The children's library, I would go over the full 500. The roundabout has been a source of frustration for me. I totally support it. Been frustrated by the moving target as far as costs go and design and whatnot. I know there's a lot of elements in play, but as we get to the gateway thing as well, I'm going to want to talk further with staff and the powers that be about changing the way we look at things in terms of hardscape versus landscaping versus irrigation versus maintenance. I think we live in a rather arid area, and we can look more seriously at attractive hardscaping, which may actually be more expensive in the initial run, but may look better longer than we have today. But I will fund that at $700,000. Going to the median project, I agree with Mr. Hotchkiss. It may be even more of a maintenance issue than it is a capital issue. And I would like to further look at, and perhaps in the design way, at looking at doing some kind of attractive hardscaping or natural rock or even concrete with interspersed trees. But I would put $100,000 in that one, and that would be for a conceptual design idea. The citywide pavement, I was going to fund at $300,000. Signage, I realize that this is going to be complex. I really want to go further on with the stakeholder involvement in terms of getting the DO, the chamber, the Historic Society, the different people that are the players in that involved. And there's a horse and cart situation that I want to make sure we get correct before we go to scope that out. I'm saying yes to that. Why, I wasn't being clear? No. Oh. Yes, full funding on the Library Plaza final design. Cabrillo Ball Field. I do believe that is scalable, and I don't know how the numbers would work. I wouldn't mind combining that particular funding, since it's both Park and Rec issues, for Kids World and the Cabrillo Ball Field, if that was possible to do that. And I don't know if it's a way to split the baby on that, or if that makes sense, or what the priority is for timing. But if there were 150,000 or whatever that come off the Cabrillo Ball Field and could go to the Kids World renovation, if that were feasible, I would favor that. So I don't know how to put that to staff. I can just put those numbers in for me if you would. Then
300 to Cabrillo and 150.
Yes, thank you. So that leaves us with the extra 600, which I would say I would like to fully fund the HVAC, but I realize, as Mr. Dewey pointed out, that we can do that, and we'll do that with some other sacrifices. I'd put 300 towards the police department HVAC, and then I would like to fully fund the request for the community arts project, and that should bring us, according to this thing, to my total.
Mr. White.
Okay, I support the fire, the Laguna flood, on the east side, the street lighting and the bridge. I support the library. I support 350 for the Las Positas roundabout. I support the Garden Street. I put 100,000 into the landscape. I put 300 into the paving enhancements. I put 100 into the signage design, at least to get started on that. 100 into the Library Plaza final design. Full funding of the HVAC, and 100 into the community arts workshop. And I think I have a little money left over.
I'm going to do this a little bit backwards. I wanted to support the HVAC fully, which is 600,000, and the arts workshop fully at 300,000, which means if we're dealing with a zero-sum game, we got to come up with $900,000. So here's how I would do that. All of the recommendations from staff with the following modifications: eliminate the refuge islands, which is 110,000. For the library, and this is painful, but fund the library at a 50%, which would be $250,000 savings. For the Gateway project, a 50% financing it, another savings of $250,000. And half of the East Side streetlights, which would be a saving of $140,000, and take $150,000 off Cabrillo, on that comes up to $900. So that makes it a zero-sum game if we do all that. Cabrillo take 150,000 off it, savings, so am I correct in saying that's a zero sum? I think so.
Okay, so let me do that. So what I'm going to go through my list, and then what I'd like to do is see where all 7 of us said something and put it up and see what number shows up and see where we go. So I'm going to start with the fire, Laguna flood, the street lighting and Yananali Bridge, the children's library. I agree with Mr. White on 350. I think we can do 350 on the roundabout and find the other 350 in another budget year. I mean, it shows a commitment, but in terms of allocating funding, that will work. The city street-wide repair also at 300. Of course, I didn't add any of this up. I'm just telling you what I want, and we're going to see where we go. The plaza final design and the full funding for the community arts workshop. So as I see it, where I see 7 checks somehow, 1, 2, 3. Frank, Mr. Hotchkiss, you didn't mention the fire, the 47,000, or did you? Or
I didn't mention it because I'm 100% for all the things that I didn't mention.
okay, got it. All right. So I see 7 checks. I just want to do this ones where everyone said yes to something. So I see street lighting improvements. Why don't we just put the full funding and see what happens? Is that okay, Mr. Hotchkiss? Okay, since all 7
Sure,
of
we're
us
gonna
said it.
give and take.
So
Yeah,
put
that's
280
fine.
there. Put 433 for the bridge. Put the library remodel. I know Mr. Hotchkiss put 250 down, but let's see where we head. Let's see where we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it looks like the community arts workshop at the bottom got all 7 of us saying something. Okay. We have to remember, minus Mr. Rouse, we have sidewalks, but maybe we don't. So just to put that in mind. So then the next round looks like if you're looking at 6 votes for things include. You can help me out here, staff. If
Madam
I see
Mayor,
the
I
Library
see
Plaza is one,
Library Plaza final design. I also see Laguna flood control.
and Laguna Flood Control. Okay. And was everything 5 or less at that point? Looks
Yeah, you had quite a few votes for Cliff Las Positas.
Right.
But you had for different amounts.
but for different amounts. So maybe if I can suggest to my colleagues, plug in 350 there and then see, and if we can change it.
Sure.
Well, let me take that out for a minute because I know, let me just ask, is there consensus right now to make sure to keep this where it is? Or do we want to
Keep what where it is?
keep the numbers there so that we're going to keep those numbers? Because now I think we're going to be moving numbers around afterwards. But this looks like these are the top priorities of all 7 of us.
Right. Did we take out the pedestrian safety islands?
Yeah, that's
Refuge?
not listed just yet. It could
Okay.
be later, but at this point,
Okay, let's start with this.
I don't think we need a motion. I just want a sense of the council. This seems like this is the absolute must-haves, right? Okay. So if you're on that list, you're happy. Good. Okay, now the more wrangling, I think, happens. So the next ones, it looked like, so then it's the, I think the roundabout was the next one that had the most votes. Or
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Francisco.
As you well know,
You're
I don't
gonna-
think the roundabout's a good idea.
Yeah.
But a $350,000 roundabout is better than a $700,000 roundabout. So
Well-
I would support that.
Okay. I mean, I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting it'll cost $350,000. It just means we're.
I understand.
Okay. All right. Well, then, yay, Mr. Francisco. Let's put 350 down there.
It's a round instead of a roundabout at this point.
It's just timing. It's all about timing.
Can I argue against that? Because if does that mean that we're looking at the next budget cycle and taking $350 from that, which might be something we could use for ongoing costs like staff salaries or something like that?
No, it means we just get half a roundabout. No, I think it would push it off to another year, right?
Right, and I'm not
Which
even
is-
thinking this fiscal year, I'm thinking the following one.
Correct, Madam Mayor. Staff's opinion, we've scaled this back to where we need $700,000 to finish the roundabout. I think we need a decision in this time frame of, yes, we want to move forward with the roundabout, work on the design, get the design approvals, get it all set up and ready to go. You could break up the funding into two different chunks like you're proposing now and then as part of the capital improvement project, not in this upcoming budget and the following budget, and fund the remainder that way.
I just think we may as well just bite the bullet.
The bullet?
Yeah.
All right, let me yes, Mr. Hotchkiss.
I just want to say I joined Ms. Murillo in the roundabout is a city, it's one of the major thoroughfares in our city. And 20 years from now, we're going to say, what were we thinking about? Of course we needed that. It definitely improves traffic flow. It's definitely expensive, less than we thought. And I think we should bite the bullet, as Ms. Murillo said.
Well, if Mr. Hotchkiss says to put $700,000 to a roundabout, then I think we should.
I would like to do that.
Okay, well, maybe we need a. All right, so let's. Then now we're back down to a split decision here. So, okay, why don't we make a motion take out the $700,000 for the roundabout? Because I'd like a 7-0 vote if we could get this, so we're secure on this to start. Is that sound? Are we in agreement with what's here right now? Yes.
If you want a motion now, Madam Mayor, I so move.
Okay. This is just round one. We still have more work to do.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion on this?
Right, I do.
Just this for now. We're not going to change this. That's the idea.
Didn't we all agree that we wanted the 600 for the HVAC?
No, we did not all
did not all agree?
We did not
I
all
see.
agree.
All right.
Okay? All right. So for this amount, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now, we have a sidewalk issue. So that Mr. Rouse has to leave the room for, we haven't even talked about yet. So my suggestion is, because we're going to be moving money all the way around, we should have that discussion with the six of us to find out if there's any interest, see what that interest is, and then we can put that number in if there is a number, and then that will help us figure out the rest. Does that sound okay? Yes? Okay. So Mr. Rouse is going to, don't
Don't
go
go
home.
far.
Well, don't go home. Okay.
This won't take very long.
Far enough. Go far enough. Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Okay. Yes, Mr. Hart.
I think we should quickly decide that we don't have $1.8 million for the sidewalks.
I agree.
Do we want to hear anything from staff, or we just forget the sidewalks?
Well, I think we should hear a quick explanation. That's only fair.
Okay. Mr. Casey, and it might be, I hear what you're saying. Mr. Casey, how about 3 sentences about sidewalks or something? Or, well, why don't you do your presentation about the sidewalks and let's make
really
our
quick.
decision.
This is a former RDA project, and so that's why we brought this forward for consideration. It's to repair the sidewalks coming off of State Street on Haley, Coda, Ortega, between Chapala and Santa Barbara Street. When we had RDA money and the finishing it out, it was a good idea to fix the sidewalks. They could use repair. They're not in a great state of disrepair. And that's why on the staff recommended list, it fell closer to the bottom as well when you did the competing priorities. But it's also scalable. It's one of those you could do certain block segments if you wanted to fund it at a lower level.
Okay, so I'm hearing from Mr. Hart, there's a proposal just to not bother with the 1.8 million.
So moved.
And I would agree with them because we're already trying to divide the pie.
Even
We've
without
got
it.
tiny little pieces. We don't need to add to that
Okay.
confusion.
Okay, so there's a motion and second to take off the 1.8 sidewalks. Is it right?
Right.
Wait, we haven't voted yet,
No.
Mr. Rouse. Please,
Cover
please
your
leave.
ears.
Please leave. We're just being official here. There we go. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, Mr. Rouse, you can come back. All right. Can I also make the assumption that the $650 for self-insurance fund is also off the table? We're not going to bother with that tonight because, yes? Okay. All right. So we now have, how much left? We have 2.16 left.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Hart.
I think if we could wrestle with the HVAC, I think we would make a big chunk of progress there because it's one of the last big things I think that we were kind of all sympathetic to. But my preference would be to, charge with Mr. Dewey with having that funded this fiscal year because it is important, but shifting the things that originally were in this fiscal year later. So defer the long list of items that would originally have been funded this year and instead do the HVAC for the police department, but not actually have that as a one-time recipient of funds through this process.
So you're saying not to put it down for tonight, but to make sure it happens in the next budget cycle, which means that all the things that they listed will be deferred another year.
Yes.
Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Mr. White, did you want to
I do want to chime in on that, and that is that this is an area where we've talked about just Mr. Dewey has been charged with this task of tending to maintaining our infrastructure, and we have not fully funded that program. Where are we with funding Mr. Dewey's? I know there was a what we'd like to fund it at, and where are we funding? Where do we think we're funding that now, Mr. Armstrong?
I think we're still trying to define it. We know we're not putting enough money into the system, and we're on two tracks. One, we've got an unfunded liability, and second, we're trying over the next 2 or 3 years to boost up the ongoing money to Mr. Dewey. I think why we looked at it this way is he does have money in his fund balance, so there's some cash there. He felt that, we still plan to do the full project, that he could push these other projects out for a year because he thought this was a higher priority. And then over the next couple of years, we have to continue to refine his program and figure out what the appropriate level is. It's probably, I'd say, $500,000 a year we need to figure out how we fund on an ongoing basis.
We need an additional $500,000 a year, more or less, just for this kind of maintenance ongoing activity.
For the facility renewal part of what Mr. Dewey does. Although I have to say, though, he's made a tremendous amount of progress. So I think we're much further ahead than where we were maybe even 4 or 5 years ago.
And in the scale of what's that $500,000, is that part of a $2 million budget? Or?
As I recall, it's $1.5 million a year that we put in there, Mr. Dewey?
So, but that's just $600,000 of $1.5 million dollar program. That's a big chunk of it. So that's a huge proportion. So I just feel like that's too big of a bite to take out of that maintenance program. I'm willing to scale it, as Mr. Hart was saying, but I feel like I'm uncomfortable with going all the way there. So I would suggest, let's just throw, how about 2/3 of it? Let's go with 4 out of the 600,000 and see whether we can get some council support on that.
Okay, so why don't we...
May I ask a question?
Yes,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Hopkins.
If we do that, does that mean we're not going to do that project? Or we're just going to get $200,000 from an additional source?
We'll still do the project in full. What it means is those other projects that Mr. Dewey talked about,
right.
Some of them will get delayed out another fiscal year.
But not this one?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so there's a suggestion. I guess it doesn't make any sense just to go yay or nay on each individual item because we don't know how it will total up. So it's just sort of the full package, right? So if we wanted to put 400 into HVAC.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, I supported the 600, but 400 is a good move in the right direction.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Hart?
I think actually we really should be thinking of it in terms of the things that are on Mr. Dewey's list as opposed to the HVAC, because I think what staff's basically telling us is they can do the HVAC without this money, but they can't do these other things. And I think if these other things were included on this list, we might look at this very differently. And so maybe we should do that, is actually put all those things on the list and look at it that way, because staff's clearly telling us they can do the HVAC without putting the $600,000 into the project.
They didn't seem as important as the HVAC when I heard the list.
Right. That's their priority. That's staff's priority.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
And the conversation that actually I've had with staff a bit and with Mr. Hart a little bit was, we could just take this $4.3 million and put it into our capital program and then look at the whole soup, is kind of one other approach that we could have taken on this deal. We chose not to. and it inhibits the conversation to a modest degree. But I remain extremely concerned about this, and obviously I think we all do, and we'll be having more conversations about this in the future. Just maintaining the city resources, we're taking a big step backwards when we take $600,000 out of this program that we've fought hard to create for Mr. Dewey to do his magic with just maintaining these old buildings bit by bit. So considering that this limited process that we're going through, I believe that this is a reasonable compromise to be going this route.
Madam Mayor, maybe
Yes.
another way to go at this would be the other way, which is the stuff that we might have more agreement on. For example, I think that the rebuilding the Gateway Median Parkway landscapes, I didn't hear a lot of support for that. Certainly not at the $500,000 level.
I heard a lot of 100.
Yeah, so I think at the maximum, if we just put that in as a placeholder, is $100,000. Maybe we're starting to get closer to where we're trying to get. Similarly, I think we heard a lot of support for the Cabrillo Ball Field renovation, either at the fully allocated amount or just about $100,000 less, which was the restroom.
I heard 300 quite a bit. So
Well, I don't know about the 300. The 300 doesn't seem to be a magic number related to what they're trying to do. It sounded like Ms. Zachary was talking about being able to potentially pull out the restroom interior remodel. I'm not sure. I think that's probably something important. But if other council members don't want to fully fund that, we could back out that specific number, which was, what, $110,000? Is that what you said, Ms. Zachary?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Hart, first of all, I'd just like to say I misspoke about the restroom part of the project. However, when we go in to do the renovation project, we'll look at the whole park and build what we can now and build what we can later. So the things that we would potentially take out, which could come to about $150,000, are enhanced lighting and looking at the irrigation. So that would get you down to 300 instead of 455. We would still plan it in the design and the permitting
And it
of
would
the
still
project.
happen eventually.
So it could be done at some point in the future.
Okay, so I'm hearing 300 on Cabrillo Ball Field. Why don't we put that in there?
Well, let's try it and see what it comes up with.
Okay. And we're up to 1.496. That's what's left? No.
That's what's
Yes,
left.
that's what's left. That is what is left. The pavement, the 500,000 for paving, I saw 300. That's the number. I saw 300. I saw 3 of those and then 2 for full funding. So there were 5. You want to put 300 there? Okay. We got to put the roundabout in. We haven't done that yet.
May I make a motion?
You go for where we are now?
For the roundabout, $700,000 for the roundabout.
Okay.
Second.
Is there a motion and second? So, okay, we should have a vote on that. Any comment on that?
Yes.
Yes,
I have
Mr.
some comments.
Francisco.
If staff tell me this, if we allocated half of this now and would it be possible to allocate half of this now and half of it in the future budget and still hold on to the grant money and do the project?
Yes.
In that case, I think that's a good idea.
The question was, the motion is for the full 700, and then the question was, if we put 350 now, could we do the 350 later and not lose the grant? And the answer was yes,
And still do the project.
and still do the project.
And given all of the important objectives we have here, if that's not going to harm it, I would support 350 now and 350 a year from now, I promise.
So you're voting against the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else to the motion? I mean, it's a strong argument, I have to say, given everything else. So that's, yes, Mr. Rouse.
No, I think Mr. Francisco does make a good argument, but the other side of the coin is this estimate has been such a moving target that I fear of shortcutting it now and coming up later on and going, oh, by the way, it's time to have a bake sale. We came up short again. I really don't know how we got from our original estimate or the thought that we could do it, the price we thought we could do it, and over time it inflated to what it did. Since most of our projects have gone out to bid, have come in cheaper in the last few years than what we bid them at. But I'm going to stay with the full funding for the roundabout.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for the full funding. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so the 700 stays. Okay, so we're down to basically 496. And was there anything else that rose to the top, or was it a whole bunch of?
The partial funding on the rebuilding the Gateway Median Plaza, it had
That had the most votes out of everything left?
yeah, but it was partialed.
It had more
Madam Mayor?
support than the pedestrian islands.
Pedestrian Islands had 3 votes.
Didn't the signage have
Citywide signage had 3 votes.
3 votes?
I'd make a motion for the full allocation for the citywide signage.
Well, the 250?
Yes.
I'll second it.
Okay, so any comments on the motion?
I just think that that's another half a loaf for me. I just feel like that's too much money to put into it right away.
Okay, any other?
We can also come back and reduce other stuff after the fact, too. I mean, it's just because some of these things, we didn't make motions on some of those. So
Yeah, I don't think I'm there for the full 250 yet, but I could, if we have more money left over, I might. So the motion is for the full 250. So why don't we just vote on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, so that failed. So perhaps is there interest in half?
I'll move 125.
Okay, is there a second for that?
I have a question, if I might.
Yep.
What can we do for 125? And we got to hire a designer. Don't we need the whole thing?
It's not a scalable project.
It's a much more conceptual first take. It's not.
Seems to me you got to do it right or you don't do it. So I don't think we can scale this one.
Well, and if it doesn't happen right now, I think part of it, to be honest, for me personally, is that I understand the need for it. It's a relatively new conversation as opposed to everything else here. And maybe, and I really haven't, I know Mr. House was very much involved in those conversations, but I don't know if much of we have been. So I need some education about why 250, what is it? I mean, and maybe that's a budget discussion to have in the next budget. I don't know. Well, maybe, so, okay, well, let's do process of elimination. So we have 2 things that we know we don't want, the self-insurance fund where we took off and the sidewalks we took off. Is there anything else on the list that's currently off that we're just saying we're going to take off, or do we need to parcel out the rest of this?
How many votes were there for the Kids World renovation?
Kids World.
I had 2.
2.
No. Okay.
And I had 1 for the Lower Milpas pedestrian improvements.
Okay, so maybe we should take off the Lower Milpas pedestrian improvements for now. We don't need a motion for this at this point. And how much money is left out of everything? We got
$496,000.
No. I'm sorry, I'm not being clear. The leftover items we haven't voted on yet, what's the total amount? So the refuge islands, the gateway medians, the signage. I know, I'm just looking, what's the total? And Lower Milpas pedestrian, no, we just took that off, right? And Kids World, so it's 1.2? Was that the? 1.1. So we have to go from 1.1 down to basically 500. So out of what's left, top priority?
So Kids World and signage?
I guess I would just say that in regards to Kids World, you're talking about, seeding that project versus the Cabrillo Ballfield project delivering that project. And I think that's, I think we'd rather have stuff from this one-time money than the start of another process.
Well, the Kids World project, though, that's a project, too. That's doing stuff.
No, actually, that's a plan to do stuff.
No, it's to actually to renovate it.
$250,000
Right.
renovates the whole park?
Yeah.
We currently have $60,000 in the budget for design. I think staff's opinion is 250 is probably not enough. And then we'd also I think the idea is also do outside fundraising. Is that correct, Ms. Rapp?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor and Council. I think the thing to remember is in all of this, you're talking about 2 projects for parks. We have a lot of projects and priorities in the capital program. So I think whatever you fund to either one of these projects simply allows us to not have to talk about the remaining priorities in the capital program for that particular project or that particular funding. So these are priority projects for us, whether it's funded through this money tonight, partially funded through this money tonight, or the discussion that we have about capital for FY15. So, you know, I wouldn't,
just ongoing.
You've got a big conversation. I wouldn't split hairs about, you know, put the money one place or the other. It's a priority for us, these projects.
So it looks like what's left, and even though I just said what I said about the signage design, we either do it or you don't do it. It sounds like you can't parse that one out. And I heard someone mention Kids World and the signage, which would then use up. Can we find $3 and or 4,000, whatever the balance to make it a right? Is there a way we can somehow find $3,760 to make it $500,000 and go?
We'll round it out. Don't worry.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like if we did Kids World and the signage, if we put 250 and 250.
And Madam Mayor, I would say regarding Kids World, every time I go by there, it's packed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just packed.
Yeah, and well loved. Mr. White?
And Madam Mayor, on the signage, I mean, let's face it, this, as we keep hearing and we see 30 times a year now the USS Hotchkiss coming into port, and that the whole is... Anyway.
I'm not sure if that's a credit or an albatross. I haven't figured that one out. Depends who you
It's getting
talk
late,
to.
Madam Mayor. But anyway, I think that this is a tip of the hat to our primary industry, and I think that that's one. It's an important element of what we're doing here. And as we talk about, we have a capital program that's coming forward. That therefore we're spreading out our resources, and yet we're not just rainbirding it. We're accomplishing things. So I like the idea of doing the signage plan from that perspective, and of course the numbers being so fortuitous at the end of this process. So I would move that, Madam Mayor.
So-
I would second that.
Okay, so let's move those two items. Any questions on the motion?
No, I guess I'd just like to say I'm sorry that we're not going to fund the pedestrian refuge islands. They were really high on the list for staff. They were high, for the community. But, I know when I'm on the losing end. So I just wanted to say, though, that they're pretty important for people who walk around. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's an important project. I think the ones that are already going to happen this year, I think it's a good idea to see how they work. And the East Side got quite a bit of funding
$1 million
here.
worth of resources.
Yeah,
More than that, $1.5 million.
About 25% of all the funding here went to the East Side. So, but I understand where you're coming from. Okay, we have a motion for those two items. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I just had a couple of thoughts, too, just
Mr.
before we
Hart.
finish.
Yes.
There's a couple things that I would just like to comment on. One is the Synergy Entrepreneurial Center. I understand that this is not the right time to talk about that project, but I do think it's very important. It's kind of investment in human capital and job creation. And along those same lines, a project that's very near and dear to my heart is summer youth jobs. I'd like to see us give staff some direction, perhaps. It's probably not appropriate for this capital one-time funding pot, and I recognize that as I'm going through this list and realizing how tough it is. But I do think that investing in our youth in a positive way, trying to get more kids involved in the summer youth jobs program is really, really important. I think there's other money that we can get for that. About $200,000 would be a great start to that, and I'd love to have the staff understand that that's something a priority for the council looking forward to the next budget cycle.
Great. And I look forward to a proposal also from Mr. Holliday and others about that. That would be good to see for the budget. And as in terms of the summer youth issues, it'd be good to have that in context. I know we're doing a lot already, and see where what we're currently doing and where the gaps are and where the opportunities are. So, all right, I think we did a good job. Thank you. Thank you very much. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.